Good evening, everybody. I am here with Darren Schaefer, the host of the Cooper Vortex. He's probably everybody's most favorite person in the Vortex, I would think. People like McNally too, but I think Darren has the goods on being everybody's favorite person in the Vortex. How many episodes are you up to? Are you up to now?
74, something like that.
Okay.
Got to get to 100 so I can get Russell on.
That's right. That's right. That's his thing. Yeah, that's why. By the way, your one that was recent was really funny. Brandon,
I thought it was awesome. Great. Really, really funny episode. It was really fun to do. Brandon was just awesome.
Well, Brandon's a bit of a comedian, really, but he knows his stuff. That's the thing about Brandon is that he actually does. He's not just a clown in a way. He actually knows.
He's not just a clown.
Yes, he's not just a clown there, but I mean, he knows what he's talking about though for sure. So let me see. Anyway, okay, so what we're going to do tonight, this is Suspect Roulette. I did this once already with Martin Andrade, who really knows his suspects, and I know my suspects really well too. And I was thinking, who else really knows suspects? And I was like, well, Darren's had quite a bit of suspect talk on his podcast. In fact, really, I think that was what started you on in the vortex, interviewing these people, was going to interview people about suspects. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I thought was so interesting about this case was that whether or not all these people are DB Cooper, so many of them have such an incredible story.
Yeah. Well, and the people who are promoting them too. It goes back. It's funny how when you dig into the FBI files, you really notice that nothing is new under the sun as far as Cooper theories. In fact, I wish I could pull it up, but it'll be in my book as I keep hawking this book I'm writing. But in my book, I talk about how there were, within a week of the hijacking, there were tips coming in saying, I think the flight crew was in on it. You should check on the flight crew. I saw that co-pilot who looks like Cooper. You should look into him. And there were tips coming in hot and heavy saying, he hit on the plane. He must have hit on the plane. So those were investigated. I mean, they legitimately did investigate Bill Radicek. It was the dumbest thing. And Soderlund, there's actually a 302 where Paul Soderlund's like, he was in the cockpit during the hijacking. I was talking to him during the hijacking. He's like, I know his voice. It was him. And then of course,
I've even had a couple people send me pictures of Harold Anderson with sunglasses on. There's like one picture of him with sunglasses on.
Right.
And I've seen it like 6 times. Hey, Darren, have you seen this picture of Harold Anderson? Boy, it looks just like the sketch. And he's wearing sunglasses.
God, yeah, there's nothing new. And they even looked into, they even talked to the Boeing people and said, could somebody hide on the plane? They're like, no, these panels, you have to unscrew them, yada, yada. So all that stuff. And then the other thing is that suspect grifting has been around for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Like ever since like early 70s, people were trying to make money off of suspects. Kofelt was the first one, and that lasted quite a number of years. Kofelt lasted probably from 76 to the mid 80s.
Did you ever read he's mentioned in a book, The Last of the Lincolns?
Yeah, he's got a connection to, I think one of the Lincoln ancestors, descendants. Like he was a chauffeur to a guy named Beckwith, who was, I think, Robert Todd Lincoln's like grandson or something like that. So he was like, I guess that makes him, the great grandson of Lincoln, I suppose. Yeah, he was.
I did not read that whole book. I only read the brief DB Cooper section.
Well, they brought it up a lot in the 302s. It's like, oh, by the way, he was this and that. And actually, he claimed to be a cellmate of James Earl Ray, and which is where I'm quite certain that's where Joe Weber came up with, because she came up with this theory, that Dwayne was James Earl Ray's cellmate. And I'm like, I read that in a 302, lady. So did you apparently. So anyway, but what we're going to do is I have the handy Northwest Orient bag here. I don't know what this is. It's not like a man purse or something. I don't know what it is, but I got it on eBay. So it's got a bunch of names in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with, I'm going to pull out a name, and Darren is the guest. He'll go first. He gets to defend whichever suspect I pull out. He's going to defend that suspect and say why, give the best case scenario for why that person could be Cooper. Some of these will not be easy. Some of these will be hard, but you're going to say which ones you think are Cooper, or you say which ones you give a reason why you think this person's Cooper and yada, yada. And then I will say why they're not Cooper. And then the next time I will defend this person and then you'll attack the person. So people get the hang of it. So it's a lot of fun. Andrade and I had a great time. So let's get started. You have to defend. You have to defend. Let's see. Who do we have? Oh, okay. Skip Hall. Okay, that's not too hard.
All right.
It's a layup. That's an easy layup for your first possession there.
He had the skill set to do it. He had the ability to plan something like this and execute it. He is one of the only suspects that I would look at and say there's some sort of Hispanic or Native American ancestry or heritage there. He looks exactly like the sketch. The timeline fits up. He has a bunch of weird, shady government connections and militia and mafia. Everything about Skip Hall fits, except I can't put him on the plane.
All right. So I have to attack Skip Hall. I can't put him on the plane. As you said, it's Skip Hall's difficult because at least as far as, look, that's the bottom line is people say, well, there's no connection to the hijacking. Well, if there was ever a connection to the hijacking, that'd probably be the hijacker.
Yeah. I've thought about this a lot recently. Like, how do you disprove a suspect?
Yeah. That is kind of a difficult thing to think about. How do you disprove somebody when they're
I can say right now, you are Ryan Burns 100% is Jack the Ripper. 100%.
Prove it. You
can't disprove that. I guess you could say, hey, by the way, I was born in 1983.
Well, I could have been. I could be a vampire. I guess, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess if I had to attack Skip Hall, well, I would say that his nose might be too big. I have a weird thing that I've encountered with the 302s. Cooper had a small nose, people, and that's not, there's enough evidence of this. Think about how little the Bing sketch, his little Michael Jackson looking nose, right? It looks so weird. But the fact is, Roy Rose drew that nose with Tina, Flo, and Alice sitting there watching him draw it. If they had been like, it looks stupid looking, he would have done it differently, right? We have Flo saying that one of her criticisms of McCoy was that McCoy's nose was too big. And, I don't think McCoy's nose is all that big, actually. So yet Flo is saying that McCoy's nose is bigger than Cooper's. So it's not a very big nose. So if I had to attack Skip Hall on a physical feature, it would definitely be his nose is it's just a little too big, even though it's not huge. But it's big enough to where I would say, could they think that was really a really tiny nose? But everything else on Skip Hall, it's really good. He is on my suspect matrix. He does score the highest. That's just objective bullet points, right? He checks boxes. That doesn't mean anything, but he does check the most boxes. So really attacking him is difficult because, it's just he checks the most boxes. That's all I can say.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it's more likely that Skip Hall is Cooper or that Skip Hall was directly involved in the JFK assassination?
JFK. Yeah. Because he was in Dallas. He had his motive for hijacking a plane would have just been money. And yeah, he liked money, but he was very political. I would think that if Skip Hall was going to hijack something, he might have made it political somehow. He might have said freedom for Cuba or something. I don't know. Who knows what he'd done? But no, the JFK thing, he has, man, I'm going to ostracize some people here, but I'm a lone gunman guy. I haven't seen enough evidence. I know. But Hall is definitely makes you wonder. Guys like Hall, guys like David Ferry, some of these people like Clay Shaw, some of those guys are so, it does make you wonder about, look, the FBI says that Oswald met with Skip Hall. So, or maybe, and it's like, okay, that's weird. That's really all I can say. I don't know what to think about it, but yeah, I would say that Hall's definitely connected to JFK on that for sure. All right. Yes, Drew Daniel said that. He says Ryan is the equivalent of a flat earther now because I'm a lone gunman guy. But I know. It is. I would say that of all the conspiracies out there, that's the one that I could waffle on. Because there are some weird things going on there. So, but I guess, okay, another thing about Hall, I guess you could say that if you wanted to totally buy in on tie particles, maybe he doesn't match that. I know that he did some work with aviation in the aviation aircraft industry, but really the tie looks like research and development guy. Who knows if it was Cooper's for 5 years? Who knows? But I tend to think it was Cooper's tie.
But you could potentially link Hall up to tie particles because he was working in the aerospace industry at times, and
yeah, and yeah. So no, he's not totally the antithesis of a tie particle guy. I mean, there is a connection you could make. So, all right. So I have to defend. God, don't be Recca. William J. Smith. Okay.
William J. Smith. Okay.
All right. So I would say that William J. Smith, he's the right age. Certainly. He is. There's this picture, of course, where he's older here. But I would say he's the right age. He was Hungarian or some kind of Eastern European. So he did have some swarthiness to him, or whatever you call it, olive skin. He did have that. He was the right age. He was in aviation during World War II. He had some training with parachutes for sure. He, in fact, as an aerial photographer in the war, he would have been able to dead reckon distances very well and see and observe what he's looking at. If he was hanging out the back of a 727 looking around at things, he could certainly spot landmarks and things like that. He may have had a grudge against the airlines because he was a railroad guy, and maybe the increase in air travel for air cargo may have hurt his business. I'm not sure. But yeah, I would just say that he looks enough like Cooper to pass, and that he had the aviation knowledge, I suppose, to be able to at least be comfortable in an airplane. So that's what I'll say.
I would say he has no criminal history. I've personally spoken to family members who are adamant that he is not Cooper, and it's completely ridiculous. I think William J. Smith lacked the skill set to plan and execute something like this. I don't believe he has much tie, if any, to the Pacific Northwest. I think the only thing that sort of loosely ties him is that the older picture of him looks like the aged sketch, but the aged sketch is like some sort of an 80s or 90s technology applied to a cartoon character. It's not D.B. Cooper.
Right. No, it's not. Yeah, I mean, he does, like you said, Smith looks like the sketch, but the issue, of course, again, with Smith is that it all goes back to Gunther, right? It goes back to how he was plucked from anonymity, I guess, is through the Gunther stuff. And everyone in the audience, I guess, is lucky that I didn't have to attack Bill Smith tonight, because it would have been a 30-minute discussion on Gunther. I would have attacked it, I think. I'm about ready to do that at some point.
Where are you out on Gunther these days?
Made it up. 100%. Fiction. I think it's fiction. I don't buy it. I think that it reads too much like fiction. Because, I mean, okay, fine. Let's discuss it first. We'll discuss it for a second. Everybody's hanging out. We'll get into it just for a second. The problem with Gunther is that the problem with deriving any clues from Gunther, okay, is why would Clara, let's just say Clara, okay, why would Clara give any identifiable information to Gunther about Dan Cooper, right? About the guy, right? Why would she? So the whole thing that Marty, I love Marty and then Dave, they were hunting, he found William J. Smith looking for a Dan LeClaire, something similar, right?
Right.
Why in the world would Clara or Cooper's girlfriend give anything even remotely close to his real name? Why would she give anything remotely close to identifiable information about him? I mean, the book says that the character Paul Cotton, I guess his name is, or Dan LeClaire, I guess, was on the rowing team at Rutgers after World War II. He was a paratrooper. Well, God Almighty! I mean,
but what if those details are right, but she disguised some of the details? He was on the rowing team, actually, for the University of North Carolina.
Okay, and that's fine. And yeah, maybe that's fair. But the whole point is, don't chase a lead on Gunther, because clearly there's obfuscation going on everywhere.
Now, do you think Gunther made the story up, or Gunther believes a made-up story that was told to him?
It's so fictional, though. I mean, the fact is, I would have laughed in somebody's face if they had been like, "Oh yeah, he landed in my backyard, and I went out and I found the wounded Cooper in a barn, and we went in and had drinks, and we made love and fell in love." I mean, that is so preposterously ridiculous to me, right?
If my wife found a wounded man in the backyard,
Right.
I don't think it would go that way.
No, and so I just find it so, it's almost laughable because it reads like fiction, and because it is fiction. That's
I don't
just
want
me.
it to be fiction. I said on the last episode or 2 episodes ago, but like, if I could go back in time and interview one person other than DB Cooper, of course, I'm thinking it's Max Gunther, because I really want to know.
He wouldn't tell you the truth, though.
I know, but if I talk to him, I feel like I could get a vibe from him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. I don't know. I mean, I just think that bottom line is that any suspects derived from the Gunther book, I think, are flawed, because several things are going to happen. Either Clara herself or whoever the person was who's talking to Gunther is going to obfuscate true details, or to protect his source, Gunther's going to change the details himself a little bit, right? His editors would have required that and said, "Look, we don't want to get sued by people, any names, they would have wanted it to be that way." What's interesting is that if you go back and look at the reviews of the Gunther book go on goodnewspapers.com and read the reviews of the Gunther book, it wasn't blasted. It didn't ruin his reputation. I don't know where that came from, that idea in the Vortex. People liked it. Reviewers were like, but they understood what it was, though. They were like, wink, wink. Like, seriously, they were like, well, they understood that it was kind of a plot device. He was telling a story that was disguised to be reality. It's almost like, I often make it like Fargo, like the Coen brothers, right? At the beginning of Fargo, the following is a true story, even though it's not. It's a plot device. Or I think about Moby Dick, Call Me Ishmael. And Moby Dick is based on an interview with the guy who was there, right? So it's not, but it's made to feel like it is. So no, I don't put any stock in Gunther. So okay, so it's your turn.
All right, my turn to defend.
Yes, your turn to defend. Damn.
Ted Braden.
Damn
okay.
It. Layups.
Ted Braden is a world-class badass. He definitely had the ability to plan this. He definitely had the ability to pull it off. He also was a kind of a shady dude, willing to engage in some criminal activity. There is also that story I love where is he at Fort Dix or Fort Dick?
Fort Dix.
Yeah, where he's under arrest. He went AWOL working as a mercenary in the Congo and gets arrested, brought back to the States where, I mean, that's like a death sentence.
He could have been shot for desertion. For sure.
Yeah. And instead they treat him fantastically and then just let him walk out of there.
And keep his rank and everything. Yeah, he walks out of there getting to wear his green beret. He is like the all-American badass. Yeah. I mean, keep going.
Yeah,
keep
and
going.
there's a good chance that he knew the 727 could have been jumped doing shady stuff over in Vietnam and being associated with shady people. He completely fits. I mean, the only thing against Ted, well, I'll let you do that, but he's such an incredible suspect, been around in the Vortex for a long time. He has a lot of fans in the Vortex, and Braden can't be eliminated.
Yeah. Okay. So, as many people know, Braden is Braden is my homeboy. He's one of my guys. I feel, like I said, I've often said that if I had the gun to my head and had to name a named suspect, it would have been Ted Braden. But okay, he has, I would say, two major issues. Okay, but they're big issues. They're not silver bullets technically, but they're big. He's small. He's very short. There are photos of him out there that have been found recently where he's standing with other guys, and unless those guys are 6'3", Ted Braden looks like he's about 5'6". He's 5'8", listed in the military, but he's very short. And Cooper, again, we can look at, for Cooper's height, we can look at, there are several people who said 5'9", 5'10". All those people were on the plane, though, who saw him sitting. We have 5 people who saw him standing up. All right. Dennis Lenz, the ticket agent, Lindsay, says 5'10". Now, Dennis barely thought about Cooper. In fact, they never showed him sketches, or never showed him suspects either, because he said, I would not recognize him if I saw him again. So
of course not. He sold 400 tickets that day.
Right. So we have 4 people who saw Cooper standing up. That's Alice, Flo, Tina, and Hal Williams. Hal Williams is a man who was standing face to face with Cooper and had been watching him for a while, because Hal Williams was, for what training there was back then, those gate agents actually did have some training at that time. The airlines had implemented this anti-hijacking thing for gate agents to recognize hijackers. And I've actually never found what it was. It was confidential at the time. But it apparently didn't work very well because it didn't catch Cooper.
It didn't work very well at all.
It didn't catch
walking in
else.
with a parachute, a fake grenade, and a handgun.
No, it didn't. And it didn't catch. In fact, when Richard LaPointe was hijacking his plane, his copycat attempt, they were actually doing like a seminar. They were doing like an FBI seminar in the airport at the time on spotting hijackers, and he just walked right past them. So that was Richard LaPointe. But let's think about this. So Hal Williams was watching Cooper. He even said he was standing off to the side, a little weird. There was nothing to call him out on, but he was wearing black overcoat. Was tall, he was dark olive complexion. But he would have come face to face with Cooper when Cooper handed him his boarding pass, and he tore it and handed it back to him face to face. Men are usually pretty good about measuring other men's height because we're always, it must be evolutionary biology, anthropology. Men are always measuring each other pretty well. It's like, and I think men know height pretty well too. I think that men, think about how much sports we watch. We're good about that catcher. He's 6'1", or that wide receiver 6'3". I think people, maybe we pay attention to height, but yeah. And here's Lisa, hilarious. Lisa. Bill Mitchell said Ted was 5'9". Tina Mucklow originally said 5'10". Well, guess what? Hal Williams, the only man who came face to face with him, said 6'1" plus.
I know, but Hal Williams didn't know to pay attention to that.
He did though, but he was though. Remember, he said
I disagree. It
doesn't matter. Here's the bottom line. Flo says 6'1". The first thing she wrote down was 6'1". She says in his 50s, 6'1". Alice says 6'1". Tina goes up to 6 foot tall. Hal Williams says 6'1" plus. This guy wasn't short. Okay, he may have been 5'10" with shoes on and makes him a little taller, but he wasn't short. Okay, and a man who is 5'8" when compared to, I think about this, that Tina pegged him as high as 6 feet tall. Tina was 5'8" at the time. Okay, she said that. She said 5'8". They asked her. She said 5'8". Okay, she went up as high as 6 feet tall. All of you listening, imagine how tall you are, however tall you are. I'm 6'1". If somebody was my height, and Ted Braden would have to be her height because he was 5'8", okay? There's no universe where I could ascribe someone who's my height and say that they are possibly 6'5", right? So add 4 inches to whatever height you were listening. If everybody's listening, add 4 inches. Do you think you could mistake somebody 4 inches taller than you for being who is actually your same height? That's what we have to believe for a suspect who's 5'8" or whatever. Tina stood next to the guy. Right?
All right. Let me ask you this. As a criminal defense attorney, Have you noticed any sort of trend in women being threatened by men exaggerating their height in the description?
Yeah, and so that is a thing. That is a known thing. People will exaggerate height. That is a known issue with law enforcement. And in fact, if you go in some gas stations, if you ever go into a gas station, you will see sometimes a like a measuring thing next to the door.
Yep.
That was put there because people had a problem that they learned that gas station attendants had a problem thinking of height. So basically, they said, "Look, as the perp runs out the store, look at the thing and see how tall he is. They're trying to figure that out by looking at that." So yeah, people do have a problem with height. The issue is it's consistent with Cooper. It's roughly the same for everybody who saw him standing. Everybody who saw him standing thought he was 6 feet tall. So,
okay, so you agree with my point, but not with Cooper.
Well, I guess so. But you're right, maybe so. But I still think that that's a knock on Ted Braden, is that his height, he is a little bit short.
I agree. Ted Braden is a little bit short, but I'm willing to play real fast and loose with height in an airplane.
I mean, and that is the one thing that I'm not like dying on as far as descriptions go. I still think 5'8's a little small, but I mean 5'10", maybe even 5'9" with shoes on. I don't know, but I still think, and also look, wearing black along a black trench coat makes you look taller, makes you look thinner. So there's a skinny black tie. In fact, if you Google like how to make myself look taller, they're like, wear a skinny black tie. So I mean, it does
I'll
actually
have to get a skinny black tie.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because you're what, 5'8", 5'9"?
I'm 5'7".
5'7". So you're shorter than Braden. Okay. So yes, so everybody at CooperCon, if Darren comes, try to imagine that you would tell an FBI agent that Darren looks 6 feet tall. So we'll see how that goes. But again, Darren's not threatening anybody with a bomb. The other thing about Ted Braden, it breaks my heart because I love Ted, but I think he's too short, and I think his nose is too big. I don't think that nose. I don't think that's smaller than McCoy's nose, and I don't think that you would draw Bing's nose for that guy. That's just me. So those are really, and I don't see a huge protruding lower lip too. I would say on him, I don't see anything that makes me think that his lower lip looks wonky at all.
But he posed for this photo.
Yeah, maybe he sucked in the lip like Bubba Gump. He pulled his lip in so it didn't get caught on a tripwire.
Because that's from Ramparts, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the Ramparts article, which is great. I actually bought a copy of that because
of course you did.
Well, it's got John Lennon on the cover, so I was like, there's John Lennon behind me. Okay, so I have to now. That was awkward because I love Ted. All right, so let's see. Okay, so I have to defend. Oh. Okay. John List. I can't.
John List. Okay, good luck. Good luck,
Ryan. I have to defend a freaking mass murderer. That's great. Oh, or I think they call it like a family eradicator. Like I swear to God, I think that in the FBI files, it's like John List, family eradicator. I was like, I guess that's the clinical term for somebody who kills their family. I guess it's a family eradicator. So yes, John List, family eradicator. I'll defend him. Okay, sure. I can get there a little bit. I would say that John List, the thing about List is that, okay, so this guy kills his, well, God, it's terrible. He kills his mother, his own mother, kills his wife, kills, I think, 4 of his kids who were all teenagers or younger, then just runs away. Now, this happened, I think, November 9th. 71. So it's 5 minutes before the hijacking. I mean, that's really convenient timing if you're going to be Cooper. In fact, here's a picture of List. He does have a fat lip. See that weird lower lip there? Look at that skinny little nose, right? I mean, that's a nose that looks like it could be a Bing nose, right? His hairline has that kind of Herman Munster looking hair, kind of like mine, I guess, these days. But he has that hairline that is in the Unsolved Mystery sketch. And also about John List, let's think about this. Robert Gregory, here we go, pop it up. Robert Gregory says he did not identify List as the subject of this case, but remarked that List bears a strong resemblance to the unknown subject, especially in the hairline, nose, and lips. What did I just say? That he looks like Yeah, he has the fat lip, he has the skinny nose, and he has the hairline that we want for Cooper. So yes, he was a guy who was desperate for money. Somehow he did make enough money to go start a new life. Ended up becoming an accountant in Colorado, of all places, and then moved from Colorado to, I think, Virginia, and then was caught thanks to I think it was America's Most Wanted.
It was either America's Most Wanted or Unsolved Mysteries.
Exactly, one of those
two shows.
But what they did is they had a lady make a age-enhanced bust of John List's face. And a neighbor was like, "That's my neighbor."
And goddamn, it was dead on.
It really was.
It was dead on.
It was incredible. That may be the best I've ever seen. Like, that person should have gotten an award. I hope she did.
Oh, yeah.
It was perfect. Yeah. I mean, they did it really well. So, okay, so that's all I can say on List, really.
I will say that John List was blind without his glasses. I will say that he completely lacked the skill set to plan this. He lacked the skill set to pull this off. He had a lingering ankle foot injury that had plagued him his entire life. But I think the nail in his coffin is he admitted to killing his entire family, but was like, I did not do the DB Cooper thing.
Yeah. Why would you not do that?
Why would you not do that? I mean,
cred.
Lots of people have admitted to being DB Cooper when they weren't. Here's a guy with an opportunity, and he was like, yeah, I definitely murdered my whole family, but I didn't do that skyjacking. That was awesome.
And he was asked about it, too.
Oh, of course, yeah.
He was asked. So, I mean, we have the FBI files from 1989 where they're like, yeah, we talked to him about it. He denies being Cooper and etc. So I
really like what you've said about John List, that he would have been the patron saint of no pull, because that's absolutely true.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because he would have been the missing person.
Yeah. If we had never found John List, he'd be the patron saint of the no pull crowd, because that is a guy who didn't know what he was doing with parachutes.
Yep.
And
looked like the sketch, disappeared at the right time.
Right.
But and we know looking like the sketch doesn't really mean anything.
Well, I think that's the thing about the sketches, is that I don't think that a person has to look like the sketch, but there are certain identifiable features. There's immutable characteristics, I would say, that come up ad nauseum in the 302s. Something was weird about his lower lip. End of story. Like, period. I mean, that comes up a lot.
And it's really one of the only features that stood out.
That's it. And his nose was small. I'm telling you, his nose is small. But yes, it's the protruding lower lip. I think List did have the turkey neck in that picture there I saw. There's the neck thing, protruding lower lip, skinny nose, and receding hairline, kind of like mine a little bit. So, yeah, but no, List would be, that's who a lot of people would hang their hats on. I think that Melvin Wilson, if we didn't know that, well, I'll say, I think Melvin's in here somewhere, so we'll save that. Okay. All right. So your turn to defend. Okay. You have to defend layups, man.
Wolfgang Gosset.
What is
one
this?
Of my
this
favorite.
Is rigged. It's rigged. My own game's rigged.
I believe that Wolfgang did have the skill set to plan and execute something like this. Also, he confessed to both of his sons either on their 18th or 21st birthday. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then also he weirdly went to 2 different law offices to make confessions to lawyers. Wolfgang matches the physical description. I think he could have pulled this off. And Wolfgang is an incredible story. Plus, don't forget that he was a paranormal investigator. Go watch his exorcism on YouTube. I highly recommend it.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, Gosset's really, I had this same thing with Marty Andrade. It was the same thing. I had to attack Gosset, and I actually had a harder time than I thought I would. I don't like his eyebrows. I think that he has no eyebrows. Now, granted, Cooper's wearing sunglasses, but his eyebrows are mentioned a couple times in the 302s. Cooper I believe he did have defined eyebrows, because it is mentioned by Florence Schaffner a few times. She mentions that she didn't like a particular suspect's eyebrows because he didn't have enough eyebrows. So I think she did remember him having eyebrows. So I don't think Gosset has eyebrows. I would say that this guy lived a very fantastical life in his own head a little bit. He may have been mentally ill to some point. He was certainly full of himself. I believe that Greg on your podcast mentioned how one time Greg won like the state triathlon or something, and Wolfgang jumped in front of the camera to talk about himself when they were trying to interview Greg. So, yeah, paranormal investigator. His voice is a little high. Cooper had a low voice. Gosset's voice, if you listen to the exorcism on YouTube, he does kind of talk like this. So he got a little bit of a higher voice.
But is that an affect he's sort of putting on in that moment?
I mean, maybe if you're playing tough, you're going to lower your voice and act like a tough guy. Maybe you could do that. But I don't know. Gosset, though, yeah, Gosset's harder than you think to attack, honestly. I don't like his eyebrows. I think his nose, again, I go back to the nose. I think his nose is a little too wide there. It's not pointy.
Oh, but look at that turkey neck.
I know. Yeah, I know. He's got the turkey neck for sure. Now he did not have
gambling problem, desperate for money, shows up with a bunch of money. And Greg couldn't remember if it was like December of 71 or December of 72 that he had a bunch of money.
I think it was 71. I think the story goes.
I thought that's what it was.
There's a photo actually of Gosset in November 71. So this photo was taken, I believe, November 5th of 71 when he's.
Wow, that's incredible. I don't think I've ever seen this.
Really? Yeah. No, it's November 71. I found that in a paper. I think actually maybe Drew Beeson may have found that actually. But that is a photo from November 71. So
that is great.
Yep. So if Gosset's
I wonder if that's a clip-on tie.
I don't think so. I think in the military they like to tie their ties actually. Gosset's better than people. Gosset is a B tier suspect. I mean, he's not leaning lower than that.
No, honestly. He's an A tier suspect.
You think so? Yeah.
I like Gosset. And I think he's slippery enough that it makes it believable. I have a problem with some of these super clean cut suspects because I'm like, why would you do this? I don't see it. But if you're not, Gosset's not a career criminal, I would say. I wouldn't say that. But talking to anyone that knew him would be like, oh yeah, he's not above doing something like that.
Yeah. And I would say also that he was obviously he was very bad with money.
Oh yeah.
He was a gambler, a degenerate gambler. So he could have lost the money. I mean, he could have needed the money for bookies or something, or he could have been in a jam, that sort of thing, where he needed the money badly, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's that. But again, as Nikki obviously points out, if he made it down with the money bag, he would have flooded circulation with the money going to his bookies. So maybe it would have flooded the market with $20 bills and would have been caught somehow. But no, Gosset, you're right. He's he's one of the better suspects for sure. And again, as you said, I actually wrote about Gosset. I actually had to write about Gosset recently in the book. And he confessed to two different attorneys, which is weird. Two different ones. I always thought it was one. Then I looked into it a little bit and I was like, it was two. It was actually two.
Yeah, one in Utah and one in Oregon.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I don't know. I don't understand that.
Yeah, why would you do that?
Yeah, that's a lot of effort for that. So who knows? All right, so I have to defend. This is rigged. I'm telling you. Damn it to hell on a biscuit. Richard McCoy.
All right.
This is rigged.
Not that tough to defend him.
I mean, Jesus.
You just have to be dishonest with yourself.
I know. Okay. So here's McCoy, McDougal. Okay. I would say if you had to defend McCoy, I would say that his location on November 24th, 71 is not known. No matter what they did, that's always been the issue is they think he was on campus that day, but the two classes that he had that day did not take roll. So they cannot, no matter what the FBI tried, that's always what Dan Greider's always going to have, is he's going to be able to say, and if I had Dan Greider on the show, and we've communicated about it, if I had him on my show, I know that's what he would say, is they could never show where he was on that day, period.
Is there a suspect we can show where they were on that day?
Many. I mean, not a lot of the recent ones, but some of the older ones they did. But that's a good point. But I guess the fact is that it's the one day where they couldn't show where he was, because they had receipts he bought some books the day before on campus. And on Thanksgiving, they have a witness who was from the Philippines who was like, yeah, I was at his house that day. That morning, actually, I saw him laying on the couch that morning or whatever. But on the day of the hijacking, there's no record of McCoy. So that's what I would say. And also, again, you get instant cred for actually doing it. So the fact that he actually did it, gives you some cred. And you could say that he refined his methods, although I've made an entire video about why I think that's bogus. But McCoy looks older than his age for sure. I mean, he doesn't look 28 at all. I mean, this guy looks to us 40 years old, probably that's my age, probably. So there's that. But yeah, I would just say that the best thing for McCoy is that they cannot, despite their best efforts in the time period. I guess that's the difference, is that like, it's hard for us now to go find out where Vordahl was, or, James Roman was on that day. Right. But the FBI were investigating him a few months after November 71. So they were able to really look at receipts and things like that. And they could never, he's just a black hole on that day. So that's what I would say. So have at it.
I would say he's too young. He has very prominent ears that stick out. He has a Southern accent and a lisp. The flight attendants were shown pictures of him and played an audio recording of him speaking. All of them said it was not him. The FBI had him in custody and thoroughly investigated him for the Cooper hijacking. And not only did they not pin anything on him, they eliminated him as a suspect. If there was anything that they could have said, maybe it was him, they would have tried to pin that other one on him. And then that case is closed. Okay, we got McCoy. We're not 100% sure if it was him. We're not going to tell anyone that. But we got a conviction. Hooray!
Yeah. I mean, it's, like I said, it's not McCoy, people. It's just not. I mean, you can look, his voice sounded so weird that one of the co-pilots said they thought he was disguising his voice, that he was just making a voice. And what's funny in the FBI files, they're like, when the FBI guys are interviewing him, they're like, yeah, his voice does sound pretty weird. Like they even say that. They're like, yeah, this guy's got a weird voice. Something's wrong with him. He speaks weird. He rolls his R's, I think they're saying. So yeah, it's just not his. He was a guy who was, why would he be so panicky on his second turn?
Right. And I know you just took a shot at me, because I always talk about how McCoy did improve on a few things from Cooper's skyjacking. But even if he did that, if he did a couple of things differently that were a little bit smarter, there's no way he executes it perfectly and super calm and no bubbles, no troubles, and then does it again and is a hot mess.
Sweating profusely, locks himself in the bathroom accidentally.
Yeah, if anything, it should have been the other way around. The first one, he was a real hot mess. The second one, he got it all dialed in, had everything figured out, calm, cool, collected.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize this about McCoy, is that they knew he was a hijacker before he even started the hijacking.
Yeah, they were already diverting the plane.
They were diverting the plane to Grand Junction, Colorado. They were like, hey, we have a skyjacker on board. We're pretty sure we're about to get hijacked. I'm going to invent, the pilot said, I'm going to invent a maintenance problem. We're going to land. And as soon as McCoy heard, we're diverting to Grand Junction, Colorado, he was like, nope. He knew he knew they were onto him, I think. So, but yeah, he was so flustered that he was sweating his makeup off of him. He locked himself in the bathroom. He left his ransom note in the airport terminal. He was so nervous.
I know, that's the dumbest thing of all time.
And the woman is in an envelope, and a gate agent walks on the plane saying, "Hey, did anyone leave this out there?" Where he jumps up. Ah! I think that thing about like if he had like a hat like Charlie Chaplin, it would like flown off his head, like like an old Laurel and Hardy skit. But that's McCoy though. So okay, so you have to defend layups, man. You're gonna like score 100 points like Wilt Chamberlain. This is bad. This is Milton Vordahl. So
Milton Vordahl, he is a weird, eccentric genius who is also like an extreme narcissist, has a weird, wacky personality. He is working on patenting all these crazy titanium, all these different types of metals. I'm not going to get into it because I'm not smart enough to do that. But like the particles on the tie can perfectly fit Milton Vordahl. Also, people in the Vortex, like yourself, have spoken to his family and they don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's really important because it's not like we would talk to them and they're like, that's ridiculous. He would have never done this. Mm-hmm. He could have never done this. He's a little bit old, but he was super active and super fit, like into his 80s, and built a bunch of weird contraptions and machines at his house. He's an interesting suspect.
Yeah, obviously, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. But I guess that the flaw with Vordahl has always been for me that he did not seem to have, that we know of, practical knowledge of aircraft like that. I know he built metals for planes and he worked around planes a lot, but it's different than like knowing the structure of an aircraft is different than knowing, knowing where the oxygen bottles are, or knowing what flap settings guys are jumping out at. And Cooper, by all accounts, actually did seem comfortable with parachutes. Now, again, some of the people who saw him with the parachutes may not have known what it looked like to be comfortable with parachutes. I don't know. But I think that's the thing is, yeah, he's a little older, but yeah, he was athletic. And we did have his granddaughter on our show. And she said that when she met him in his 70s, she could not believe that was her grandfather because he looked like her dad's age, not her grandfather's age. So he did look younger for his age. But to attack him, really just aviation, like practical aviation knowledge. I really get the sense that Cooper was a pilot or was really adjacent to pilots a lot, overheard a lot of pilot talk. And also had motivation, really. I mean, I know that Milton was unemployed at the time, but Milton, it was not a guy who was a big spender. We have no evidence of him buying mansions or whatever. And if we listen to Julie, who was Vincent Peterson's daughter, she said that they were always upper middle class. I mean, that was a good paying job to be a metallurgist, and especially when you're the top metallurgist one of the top in the world, essentially. He was comfortable financially. So what motivation would he have to risk his life, to risk his family, to risk all this other stuff? That's really the knock on Milton, I would say. But again, this was a guy who, I guess to double back, I mean, this was a guy who seemed to suffer some mental illness of some sort. And we know that he died of a mental illness. So that may have been he had a rare medical condition that actually caused impulsivity control problems. So
okay, that makes him more of a suspect.
I know. It's like I'm not trying to attack the guy here. So I've had to attack Braden and Vordahl.
I agree with that. Milton's motive is sketchy, if there is one. But if there's a suspect that has no parachuting or aviation experience, this is the only one where I'm confident that he would have done his own research and then been super confident in the research that he did, that he would be able to pull this off.
Yeah, he seems to be enough of a Renaissance man to have just studied it and learned it.
Yeah, and cocky enough that he would just read a bunch of books about skydiving and planes and be like, okay, I got this. No problem.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was awarded by Congress for like saving the Manhattan Project. This guy did not lack in vanity, I wouldn't think. So I've never, and you read his writings, this guy was a guy who thought he was smarter than everybody else. And he was actually. So, I mean, he actually was smarter than everybody else, but you read his writings and he's a real creep. And that's the thing to defend him a little bit is that, yeah, he was a misanthrope. I mean, this guy would have had no problem inconveniencing people for his own goals, I wouldn't think. Anybody who thinks that newborn babies are as stupid as newborn animals and could be flushed down the toilet, like he said in one of his op-eds, is just, whoa, okay, this guy does not like humans. Okay. And in fact, he calls his granddaughter even gave us, I think I sent it to you, his granddaughter gave us a nice Christmas letter that he sent them when they were teenagers, and he kept like referring to humans as HS, as Homo sapiens. He was like, the HS in your neighborhood are acting like this, and it's like, geez, okay, dude.
When I've read his writings, I can imagine I'm reading the writings of D.B. Cooper.
Yeah, I got that sense. That was one of the things that I liked about that I liked about him instantly. I was like, for some reason, it feels right. You know,
it does.
It just kind of feels right. I don't know, but it just feels right. So, okay. I have to defend. It's rigged, man. I got Dwayne. All right.
Dwayne's great.
I know. I can defend Dwayne. Hoo-wee. Okay. If it wasn't for Dwayne's ears, he would be a really good match, I think, for Cooper. He does have a pouty lower lip. He would have probably had a turkey neck. He was 48 at the time. He was actually the exact age that the FBI thought Cooper was, which is 48. He was 48. He had Cooper, depending on what you read, Cooper did have some kink in his hair. And Dwayne definitely has that. Got the kink in his hair. Dwayne was tall. He was, 6 foot tall, I think. The right age. He was a crook. I mean, he was a legitimate criminal. Not a very good criminal, perhaps, but he was still a criminal. And he actually matched a lot of what Himmelsbach thought Cooper was. Himmelsbach actually liked Dwayne, and he must have mentioned it one time to Joe Weber because she flooded him with letters that he never opened. I always tell the story that when we were at Ralph Himmelsbach's grandson house, rooting through all of Himmelsbach's Cooper memorabilia, there were probably 50 letters from Joe Weber that most of them were unopened. And I felt really sad about it. But Joe had that effect on people. How that woman had that much time to write that many DZ posts and write handwritten letters to Himmelsbach and God knows who else, to Gunther, I know. She was relentless. She was a true believer, no doubt about it. But I would say that Joe Weber in many ways is Dwayne's worst enemy, really, is his worst advocate just because of her weirdness. But to defend Dwayne, he's the only, not the only suspect, but he's one of the only suspects who actually has, if you believe Joe, does have connections to that area as far as around the time of the Tina Bar money, right? There's the whole story about him about finding the money in a bucket, and it was rotted, and he threw it in a bag and into the, what was it, the Red Lion Hotel? Is that what it was?
Yeah.
And threw it in a bag, and Dwayne, what are you doing? Just throwing something in the river. Piss off. Whatever he said. He was mean to her. He was so ugly to her. I hated listening to that audio in your podcast where he's like, you don't know nothing, girl. I can't tell you nothing. Really sad. She's like, Dwayne, I'm not gonna rob you. And so yeah, Dwayne is a good match for the sketch other than his ears. He's definitely looks like he could be some sort of ethnic thing going on there. Maybe Greek looking, Italian, perhaps. I don't know about Indian. He has a high cheekbones that you want in Native Americans. So yeah, that's Dwayne. He was a crook and could have pulled it off. So, I mean, I'm not saying I'm not saying he could have pulled it off. I'm just saying he's a crook, and we don't have many outright criminals who were suspects, really.
That's true. I would say, obviously, his ears make him immediately not a suspect, in my opinion. His build at the time, I don't really think matches the build that Cooper would have had. I think Dwayne was a little bit of a huskier, thicker kind of guy. And the main evidence I have against Dwayne is that every supporting fact for Dwayne comes from Joe Weber. There isn't anyone else that found all this information and got this. Everything that led to the discovery of Dwayne as a suspect came from Joe Weber. And I just don't see anything that makes him a suspect other than anecdotes from Joe. And he's also, she was so vocal about him that so many other people looked into him. It wasn't like she floated this and, hey, that's interesting. No, she pushed it nonstop.
Relentless.
So people looked into him, and there isn't really anything to match Dwayne. Look at those ears and that face.
Yoda.
He also he didn't have an accent. I wouldn't call it an accent, but he had a very unique, gruff voice.
Yeah, and again, what's interesting is that Tina says that Cooper had a low voice, which I don't know what that means, really. I don't, what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if that means he's talking softly or if it's deep. It's, what I'm saying? It just says low, so I don't know if that means, I assume that means deep, but again, I mean, we can't be certain on that. But yeah, he did have a gruff voice, and maybe it sounded different when he was in his 40s, but, maybe he smoked a little too much. But, yeah, so that's Dwayne. So, okay, you have to defend. Let's see. All right. Now, okay, one of the things is if I pull a name that Darren doesn't really know, what I'm just going to give a filibuster on the suspect because it's.
I'm only an expert on suspects where there's been a book or something written about them.
Yeah, so I'll filibuster and just fill in everybody on these new suspects if you don't know. So, all right. So is it you have to defend? Thank God. All right. Something hard for you. Rackstraw.
Bob Rackstraw. All right. Bob Rackstraw was a shady, slippery guy. He was a pilot. He had parachute experience. He was engaging in criminal activity during this time period, sometimes even involving airplanes. He flew a plane out over the ocean and called Mayday and then flew it back and then repainted it or something like that. He most likely killed his stepfather. And that's all I got on Rackstraw.
I mean, it's not bad. I mean, the thing about Rackstraw is he's not bad on paper. In fact, he's really good on paper. He would have been Rackstraw easily could have been a copycat, easily. In fact,
I'm sure he thought about it.
Yeah, and in fact, he's very similar to McCoy in a lot of ways. They're both chopper pilots,
very similar,
Green Beret types, very similar. They're the same age. In fact, I would be interested to know if they even knew each other. They may have. They're because they were the same age and both Army chopper pilots. But the thing about Rackstraw is it's like what you said with McCoy. They had the guy in custody. They wanted to make him Cooper, and they couldn't. They actually got his palm prints. Now Cooper. I've said this a million times, but I'll say it again for anybody listening for the first time. They collected 11 partial fingerprints from around Cooper's seat. They're partial because he had either wiped them off or he was obfuscating his fingerprints with glue or something like that. I've actually asked John Detler, who was one of the original case agents there in 71, back when fingerprints were what they used and not DNA, did criminals actually put glue on their fingertips like in TV shows? He goes, absolutely they did. So that's they think Cooper did that. But Cooper left a palm print behind when he got up in his seat and stood up. He put his hands down on like think about where like in the old planes when they had a cigarette, the little cigarette,
the ashtray,
the ashtray inside on the seat, right? We're old enough to remember that they had an ashtray literally in like your seat thing, like, where you buckle your seatbelt. I don't know what that's called, the railing or whatever. I don't know what to call these, but anyway, so they got a palm print from there, and it was, I guess, recent enough to where they felt that it was Cooper's. Now, Cooper would not have obfuscated his palm prints because no one took palm prints at the time. In fact, the military still does not take palm prints, and I was able to find that the first instance of law enforcement taking palm prints, like de facto, was the LAPD and NYPD started doing it in 2003. So basically, they were really confident, though, in that palm print. And in fact, oftentimes the FBI would say, hey, look, if you want to exonerate yourself, if they're investigating a suspect, they would say, give us your palm print. And they go, sure. A lot of them would say, of course, sure. And they'll go, okay, you're good. So they were so confident in that they eliminated suspects solely by palm prints. What's funny about Rackstraw, though, is Rackstraw made himself a suspect, literally, because when he was being extradited from Iran to California to face the murder charges of his stepfather, he started talking to the FBI agent there in the plane and was like, hey, I could have been D.B. Cooper. He basically was saying, oh, you FBI guys, you investigated Cooper, didn't you? I could have been Cooper. He's like, there were hundreds of guys who could have been Cooper, including me. And he started like running his mouth. And so we have this 302 where this FBI guy's like, hey, this loudmouth jerk I was bringing back started talking about Cooper and how he could have been Cooper. Maybe y'all should look into him. And so they did. So they went to go talk to Rackstraw in the jail there in California, and they asked for his palm prints. And he said, no, I'm not giving you my palm prints. And they were pretty miffed about that because, like, why not? And so they actually wrote to the Department of Justice that they contacted the Attorney General's office and said, hey, is there a way we can force him to give us a palm print? Like, can we hold him down or something? And they're like, we'll research it and get back to you. Now he was exonerated. He was free. He was exonerated on the murder of his stepfather, in part because he played the sympathy card. He arrived in a wheelchair, in the courtroom. I was wounded in Vietnam. I can barely walk. And what's funny is there are FBI documents where they're like, he's feigning an injury in the courtroom. He's still dangerous, right? So be careful. But he goes off and he gets arrested for, he steals a plane and repaints the plane, markings. And he's caught with this new plane. And when he's arrested for stealing a plane, a month later, after he's exonerated, they say, hey, look, the FBI still wants your palm prints. And he goes, yeah, I'll give it to you. And so he gives his palm prints. And so we have this 302 here. I'll put it up there. Yeah. So it says there, the unidentified latent fingerprints and latent impression. The latent impression, this is the one that's saying the fingerprints were gone, but it says no palm prints were located here. But this is the fingerprints. They're saying he didn't match the partials at all, but his palm print didn't match either. So they exonerated him. But Rackstraw was just, look at this. Like, think about Cooper. Cooper's ugly. Okay, Cooper, or not ugly, but maybe he was ugly, maybe he wasn't. But if you look at the people who they thought looked like Cooper, they weren't attractive men at all. And so this guy does not look, like he's balding or has a receding hairline or is homely or is 48 years old or 50s even. He looks like a white guy. There's no ethnic tone to this guy at all. Wouldn't you say there's no ethnic flavor to him at all?
No.
He's a white dude. He's an Anglo like us. He's just a guy, Yeah. So, yeah, Rackstraw is just not a very, like I said, on paper, he's a good suspect as far as like his skill set. Absolutely. A pilot, a daredevil, a legitimate criminal. In fact, when they were investigating him for Cooper, they realized that back around the same time, he had stolen a bunch of dynamite from a quarry. So they were like, they're like, oh, this is the jerk who stole the dynamite 8 years ago from Cupertino or somewhere, right? So there's all these cool 302s where they're going back and forth. Different agencies saying, oh yeah, that's the guy who did this back then. He's a real jerk or whatever. Watch out for him. Or the guy saying, hey, he's faking this injury, so watch out. He could still like, judo chop you from his wheelchair, whatever. So, all right. So, all right, I have to defend. I'm defending. That's not Kenny G. That's Kenny C.
Ooh.
All right. Defending Kenny Christensen. Good God. Okay. He's male. I guess. That's it. That's all, folks. There's Kenny. Oh God. Okay. Okay. Kenny would know the aircraft, I guess. Tina Mucklow said that it was her belief that, for example, Cooper knew where the oxygen bottles were hidden. And they were hidden in a very small compartment behind the rear row of seats. Tina said that she believed that this would have only been known by someone who was familiar with that exact model of airplane, a 727. We do believe that Kenny flew on 727s. And so he had knowledge of the aircraft. He had been a paratrooper in World War II. Now, granted, he had never been in combat or anything, but he was trained as a paratrooper. So, he could have done something like that. He could have been mad about the pay. They were paid really low wages. And there were some things going on in his personal life. He had some personal, I don't want to call them demons, but he was in the time period, he wasn't really able to be who he wanted to be, I guess, in the open. That may have bothered him mentally. We know that there were people like him who, from that time period, who did acts of, I don't want to say terrorism, but did political crimes for their agendas, for their personal. We're beating around the bush here. The guy's dead. He was gay. I don't know if we're hiding this, but yes, he was a homosexual, and that was obviously in the time period not really discussed, and that he may have had some resentment about not being able to be himself, perhaps. And so I think that maybe could have fueled some anger issues in him, and maybe he could have done it for that reason.
Maybe. Or maybe the short, bald guy who doesn't match the physical description, who was working for Northwest Orient at the time, who continued to work for Northwest Orient Airlines after that, who lived in the Seattle area. Plus, his confession, if we want to call it that, was, I have something to tell you. And then he was interrupted. According to the story, was interrupted and was like, don't worry about it. We know. But like you mentioned, that was believed to have been about him being gay, not I'm DB Cooper.
Right.
There was a rumor that he had, like $200,000 exactly in his bank account when he died, which, okay, whatever. That's just a coincidence because he was a suspect that was put forward quite a bit by one person, ended up being investigated by others, and was like, oh, here's his financial records. Here's how he paid for the house. Here's why he had $200,000 in his bank account. There really is no evidence for Kenny Christensen being Cooper. He was floated by his brother, who originally tried to pitch it to Nora Ephron,
Right.
the rom-com director, about maybe making a movie about it. That didn't end up working out. So he found some private investigator who then reached out to a guy, Robert Blevins, in the Pacific Northwest, who then sort of took the story over from there and ran with it. And ran with it for, I don't know, 2011 to
Now.
Let's call it 21. I haven't heard much from him lately, but.
From Blevins?
Yeah.
Oh, he's still pushing, Kenny, for sure. He messaged me not that long ago, actually. So
That's funny. One of my favorite things he ever said to me was he would send me a lot of emails, and he sent me a bunch of them and no response back. And then he sent me like a one-line email that was like, sending an email to you is like throwing a rock down a well.
He's a poet in a way.
He's a great writer. He is a great writer.
Really is. Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about Kenny is that we met, I've said this story many times, but we met a flight attendant for Northwest at CooperCon last year at the museum there. She was working there. She had been a flight attendant for Northwest Orient in the late 60s and throughout the 70s. And she knew all these people. She knew Tina and Alice, and she knew Kenny. And she said she was stunned when she saw on TV about Kenny being Cooper, because she was like, oh my God. She goes, that was the joke back then. The inside joke in Northwest Orient that Kenny was like a part of, like he was a good natured about it, was always Cooper, because he does have that kind of, skinny, you could say he looked like the Bing sketch, I guess. If he's wearing sunglasses and a hat, you could kind of see it, I guess. But yeah, she was like, it was their big inside joke. And that's actually my theory on that photograph that has been used.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah. The photograph that has been used a lot. There's a photograph, I wish I had it to pull up, but there's a photograph of Kenny walking in a door. It looks like December of 71, actually. I think the calendar may even say it. And he's wearing a black trench coat, holding a briefcase and a paper bag. Okay. And like, who took the photo, right? This isn't like, iPhones, right? I mean, this is a staged photo. And so whether he took it himself or a friend did, right? Or whether he's, set the camera on timer or something, but he's clearly looking like DB Cooper on purpose. And to me, that was him playing along with the inside joke. He's being good natured about it. It was almost a gag photo. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and wasn't he involved with the union, like potentially as like a union steward or something? So he would have been very well known by his coworkers.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what's so preposterous is that Tina actually worked. So he worked the Asian, like apparently in Northwest Orient, that was the goal. Is if you were there long enough, you could get an Asian. You get the Far East legs of flights, right? Flights going to China and Hong Kong. Things like that. And that was what they liked. And so Kenny did that a lot. And Tina actually did that for many, many years after Flight 305. She worked her way up and got that. And so that's actually one of the things that I would like to ask Tina if I was ever able to hang out with her, is say, did you know Kenny? And I bet she did.
I bet she did.
I bet she did. And so, because the company wasn't that big really. And so I bet she did. And you're not going to hijack your own airplane. I mean, he would have no way of knowing who was going to be on that plane. In fact, Tina wasn't supposed to be there herself that day, right? She was filling in for someone who was sick. So he would have, it's too much of a risk to do that. That makes just no sense to do that. So, all right, that's Kenny. So you have to defend. Okay. Joe Lakich.
All right. His daughter was involved. I think it's the November 5/8 or 5/8 November incident. I can't remember exactly what it's called off the top of my head. But his daughter was essentially shot to death by the FBI during a botched plane hijacking situation. He worked at Nashville Electronics, which could account for the particles on the tie. Obviously, he served in the military. He matches the physical description. He's got sort of a swarthy look to him. And he had a grudge.
Okay. All right. So, well, you're forgetting the Tektronix element part of it too. Remember, he worked at a
Nashville Electronics.
Yeah, something like that. Remember,
that's where he worked. Nashville Electronics.
Yeah. Works with electronics. He is Bill Rollins's suspect, for those who don't know.
Correct.
Which does, if you try to look up his, I have it over there, but his book has the greatest cover
Yes.
art
Yes.
for any Cooper book ever. Makes no
And I
sense.
asked him about it, and it was like his daughter-in-law or something made it for him.
It's interesting. So look up his book on Lakich and look at the cover of it. So anyway, attacking Lakich. Yeah, if you've got it, Darren, grab it. So we'll look and see. Oh, there we go.
The elusive D.B. Cooper.
What
How
is
he
that?
escaped.
Just what the hell is that?
He's parachuting into Oz.
Parachuting
Seattle's
into-
nickname.
Wait,
The Emerald City.
what's the Emerald City?
Seattle.
Oh, well, he jumped into Portland. but yeah, that is great cover art, really. But Lakich,
At least it's a round canopy.
Yeah, that's true. One of the if they dare put a parachute on my book, I want creative control. I do not want it. Better be a damn round canopy, because you look at like Into the Blast and it's like this skydiver on the cover of it. It annoys me to no end. But I would say that Lakich. Here's the thing: why would a guy whose daughter was killed in a hijacking? I have a daughter. Why would a guy who has a daughter who's killed in a hijacking 2 weeks later go and threaten other young women in a hijacking where they could die? And
good point.
How is he going to get back at the FBI by stealing Northwest Orient's money? Like, that's not really, I'm going to make you busy. Ha ha ha.
Well, he got at the FBI because he made fools of them. They didn't solve this case.
Right. Well, he knew he was going to get away for sure. But I would just say that, I mean, really, he sued the FBI and actually won. In fact, that was the first time ever, and maybe the only time, that the FBI actually had to pay out on a wrongful death that they caused. I mean, it was the first time. I don't know if it was the last time. It was the first time. So it was a big settlement. But another reason, too, is his daughter had a daughter at the time who was about 9 months old. So he adopted his daughter's daughter and raised her as his own daughter. So she's around. Her name is Susan. Lakich was her dad. That's all she ever knew, was he was her father. So he adopted this daughter. So I don't think he would go. It doesn't seem like the type to go commit some crazy hijacking where he could get killed or put in prison when he was grieving and just adopting this baby, because the baby's father was also killed in the hijacking. All right. So it was an ugly scene there for sure. But Lakich, I just don't know the motivation. I don't buy the grudge thing there with him. I just don't think that makes sense to go take out your anger on other young women in a hijacking. I don't see that. So, and really and also he was never in the airborne. I've seen his military stuff. He was not an airborne guy. He was in the infantry. So he was never, he was not aviation adjacent in any way. He was a grunt, an infantry soldier. Okay. So I have to defend. That's blank. I have to defend. Okay. Sheridan Peterson. Okay, I can do that. Okay. So Peterson knew aircraft pretty well. He worked for Boeing. He knew technical specs on aircraft pretty well. He was a word that I'm going to start incorporating into my Cooper stuff is slippery. He used that word a lot, slippery. Sheridan is slippery, no doubt about it. He's a slippery fella. And allegedly in Nepal at the time, there he is there. He does have a heavier lower lip. His face is close enough, I guess. I mean, there's some other issues that I'm sure you'll hit on. But Peterson was definitely capable. He had been a smoke jumper. And that is, the FBI have always contended that Cooper may have been a smoke jumper at some point in his life, just because of the nature of the hijacking, parachuting into forested areas, things like that. But yeah, also Peterson could have come into contact with tie particle with issues somehow at the plant there at Boeing. He was tall. He was 6 feet tall. Or he's big. He was a little bigger. I think Peterson might have been like 6'2". Maybe I was too tall, really. Yeah, he was 6'2", I think, actually. But yeah, the FBI liked him because of the Boeing connection. He was a Boeing skydiver. So the FBI, and they weren't able to verify. In fact, that's one of the reasons why Ralph Hope, during their reevaluation of Cooper suspects in the early 2000s, Agent Ralph Hope picked out several individuals, about 4 out of 500 suspects. And Peterson was one of them because they could never verify his whereabouts. He said he was in Nepal fathering a bunch of babies, but they looked into it and could not verify that. And so they wanted to verify him, but he had no alibi that they believed in. They didn't believe his alibi. So he continued to be a viable suspect. They did get his DNA. He gave it to them freely, but I guess that's more your line if you're attacking Sheridan. So go ahead.
I'll start with he doesn't match the physical description at all. Bald. He had like bright blue eyes, if I remember.
Yeah,
correctly.
and this is his 1971 passport, by the way. So this is the year, actually, we're looking at. Passport photo. So continue.
Yeah. That's 71, DB Cooper. I don't think so. Also, there seems to be some evidence that he was in Nepal at the time. Obviously, we're not going hut to hut and verifying, like, do you remember this guy? Was he here? So we're not getting that, but there's no evidence that he was in the United States at the time. No evidence that he was in the United States. I'm not talking Portland, Oregon.
No.
The United States.
To put a better point on it, there's no evidence he was on this hemisphere of the planet.
Yeah. And, he was very politically active and he had a lot of opinions. Yeah. And I think with those skyjackings at the time, I don't think he would have wasted that opportunity to get a political message out. And lastly, one of the things that I think totally eliminates him is that he was coy about being Cooper. And if you actually did this and someone was like, hey, is there any chance that you were Cooper? I'd be like, no, of course not. Yeah. Not me.
Way too
that's foolish
about it. And so was
Rackstraw. Yeah, I've Rackstraw and Sheridan Peterson both were like, well, I could have done it.
Yeah, it's just too
I don't
cute.
know if it was me. Maybe.
Yeah,
and that's part of that thing where it's cool to be DB Cooper.
Yeah.
So if I accuse Sheridan Peterson, hey, I think you might be the Zodiac killer, I think he would have immediately been like, that's ridiculous. Don't ever say that.
Right. Yeah.
Cooper,
it's too
sure, maybe.
Look, I mean, I've been around, I've represented over 1,000 defendants, literally. I don't know any who would have behaved like that. Especially the ones that are facing major incarceration. They're not going to be that cute about it. So Peterson also, he was not a bad guy. He was a weird guy, but his whole life, look, Peterson's only arrest, the only time he was ever arrested was when he was doing a sit-in in a Mississippi diner during the civil rights movement. That was his only arrest. So he was not a bad guy. He was a good guy, actually. And in fact, most of his life was spent, the Vietnam War was spent over there helping refugees. That's what he wanted to do with his life, was help other people. So, I do think he was sincere in the interview on that show he did with the one that Eric was on, I think 2018. There was a Discovery Channel documentary or something where they talked to Peterson. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I'm a good guy. Cooper was a bad guy. I think that was how he really felt. He was like, I'm not a bad guy. So now Peterson, and you talk to Mark Meltzer, who knew Sheridan. He says he had unforgettable eyes. He had these just piercing blue eyes, baby blue eyes that you could not forget. You could not look in his eyes and forget them. And I think that's a problem with me. Cooper could have had green eyes, could have had hazel eyes. So I don't discount people who have green or hazel eyes, but blue and even dark blue sometimes can look, but you have bright blue eyes. man, that's really, especially when it's contrasted with his olive skin, that's going to be a really weird look, I think. And that would be identifiable. At least I think a woman I think Flo would have caught that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So you have to defend LD Cooper.
LD Cooper. So I have to defend LD Cooper. LD Cooper, the night of the hijacking, according to Marla, comes back to their house, and he's all roughed up and bloodied, and they said, oh, don't worry about it. He got into a car accident. And then the family, it was sort of an open secret in the family that LD had done this. And then the FBI was a little interested in LD around 2011 also. That might be all I have to defend LD Cooper.
Okay. Okay. Well, to attack LD, well, I will back up a little bit that I've been saying it was Tina for a while, but it's actually Flo. I found out just this week, actually. It was Flo who said that LD looked the most like Cooper of anybody she had ever seen. And that's what got Curtis Ng all enthused about LD, was that you got one of the flight attendants saying, yeah, that guy looks just like him. That's nobody else other than Donald Sylvester Murphy back in 72 ever had a stewardess say that looks just like him. And that's what Flo said about LD Cooper. So that's his best argument. I think it's the best for him, is that he basically was ID'd by a stewardess in a roundabout way. But now 39 years later, though.
Yeah.
So years later, but still, that's, but to attack LD, I think that when Marla saw LD, she saw her she saw her Uncle Dewey pull up with LD bloody I think what she was witnessing, she was 7 years old. She was witnessing LD being taken away from a drunk driving accident. That's what I think. Because LD, I have done the research on this. I looked it up. LD was charged with felony DUI in 1962. Now, felony DUI means it's your third DUI conviction. You get a felony, you're charged with a felony DUI. So he was a felon for DUI. Okay. Now remember, this is the era where it was like, hey, Skeeter, you been drinking? That sounds about right, officer. Okay, I'll follow you home. Like, it was that era, right? It wasn't like, step out of the car, please. This was in the 60s where it was like, he's just drunk. We'll follow him home. So it was hard to get a DUI. So point is, if he had 3 DUIs he was convicted for, how many was he not ever arrested for at all back then, right? So I think he may have liked to drink and drive. So I think that a 7-year-old is not understanding what she's seeing when she's seeing a guy bloodied and bruised, or maybe got in a bar fight. I mean, he was a rough and tumble guy. LD was. Interestingly about LD, I found just a few months ago in the vault, it was revealed that, and again, talk about hats flying off your head. My hat flew off my head when I saw that a 1971 document saying that they were investigating LD Cooper. I was like, oh my God, it's the LD Cooper. There's no other LD Cooper. It's the guy from Sisters, Oregon. I was like, oh my God. So the FBI investigated him in 71, and which is fascinating. I don't know how he got into it. They got into it, but his sister.
That's what I would love to know, is how did he become a suspect in 71?
I think because, okay, so if you look at the 302, a lot is redacted in a above paragraph, and it says her other son, LD Cooper. So I think that Ma Cooper was being asked about Dewey, because Dewey worked at Boeing. And I know that everybody with the name Cooper who worked at Boeing was actually investigated.
Cooper at Boeing, yeah.
So I do think that they just came around asking about them, and somehow it got to LD. But Ma Cooper did say, look, the last I seen him, he had been discharged from the VA hospital last month, so October of 71. He had been in and out of the VA hospital for psychiatric reasons because he had developed PTSD during the Korean War. Okay. And so he had PTSD issues, which really kind of lines up with maybe Cooper himself really having some mental issues. Also, his wife killed herself in January of 71. So Ma Cooper says that, and I've verified that on newspapers.com. She overdosed on pills on purpose. And so he was really upset about that at the time. So 71 was a rough year for LD. And really, what's interesting about that is that when I read that, it actually made LD a better suspect to me, a lot better, just because of his mental fatigue. I don't know of any hijackers other than the guy who was in our chat, Marty McNally.
Yeah, there is a hijacker in our chat.
Yes, there is a skyjacker, a copycat Cooper hijacker in our chat. In fact, he's the only one, literally, who I would say of all those guys I've researched did not have major mental illness, I guess. Now, Mac, does, obviously we won't get into that, but he didn't have major mental illness, I guess. Mac was a self-admitted criminal. He was a thief. He admits to that. So, but LD though matches really well with what we want for Cooper. A guy who is at his wit's end. He's in and out of the VA hospital. Nobody wants to be in the VA hospital for mental illness, for PTSD. That's really bad, especially in that era. Think about that, right? That's the era where, like, all the guys from World War II, I mean, everybody, cavemen who fought had PTSD. This is not a new thing. Anybody who fights combat had PTSD, or who was susceptible to it. But it wasn't treated like it is now. So to be able to actually go to the VA hospital and admit yourself there, I think LD must have had major problems. And that really lines up with what I suspect Cooper may have had. Problem with LD, though, is just the aviation experience. He was in the surface Navy. He was not even in like the Navy Air Force. He was in surface Navy. So he had no aviation history. He did have Dewey, who worked at Boeing, and there's that. But I still think that Cooper knew airplanes really well. I mean, if you look at the copycats, all of them had practical aviation experience. Mac in our chat, Mark McNally had something like 1,800 hours in a P-2 Neptune reconnaissance plane. McCoy was a chopper pilot. Hetty was a champion skydiver and a paratrooper. LaPointe was a helicopter crewman who had They wore parachutes in those things. Heinemann was a B-17 crewman in World War II. Melvin Fisher, the last one, was in World War II as a pilot trainee, ended up on bombers. So they all had practical aviation experience. And I don't see any reason why Cooper would not have also be the same thing. So that's where I go with LD Cooper. But anyway.
I'm so impressed with your knowledge of the copycats, because I am always hesitant to mention details because I always get them mixed up. But I'm very impressed with your knowledge of the copycats.
Thank you. That's my next book is Copycats. Thanks to Chris Cunningham for the title. It's going to be called Copycat: The Men Who Tried and Failed to be DB Cooper. So good title. Thank you, Chris. Marty McNally is going to write the foreword to it. So whenever I get around to it, Mac, you'll be writing the foreword. So, okay. Okay, my turn to defend. I'm going to defend. Jesus. Oh, man. Okay. It's a joke. Recca.
Recca's easy to defend.
Walter Pekka. He's not. Not even remotely. Okay. Okay. Again, he's a male. He's a man. Okay. Honestly, though, Recca, if he fit if not for everything you're about to say, but for what Darren's about to say, Rekka's actually fits the profile, I guess, very well, actually. We do have a skydiving thief, robber. He's Bodie from Point Break. I mean, he is a master skydiver, and he was a legitimate master skydiver. No doubt about it. He was a para jumper, which is the special forces for the Air Force. So that's what they do. That's their special forces. There's Navy SEALs, there's Green Berets and Army Rangers. Marines have Marine Recon. Air Force has Air Force para jumpers.
Pararescue, the PJs.
Pararescue jumpers. Yeah, that's what he did. He was in his own head. He was not afraid to commit crimes. He was a criminal. He was a felon. I believe he had robbed a Bob's Big Boy?
Yeah, Bob's Big Boy.
So he had robbed a Bob's Big Boy. So he was a felon. So, I mean, really, I do wonder if Rekka was actually investigated. In fact, Don Brennan, there is some connection. Does that name ring a bell to you? Don Brennan. Yeah. I think that the Rekka grift discusses Brennan a lot.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar.
And in the vault that was released today, I saw Don Brennan as a suspect. So I was like, oh, I know that name. That's Don. Okay, that's the Rekka guy, right? So I was like, okay. So I would be surprised, actually. I would not be surprised if Rekka was investigated by the FBI back then, because, hey, I mean, how many felons how many armed robbing felons are also skydivers?
With a parachute license in Washington State.
There you go. Yes. And he was there at the time. He was living, I think, he was working on the dams, I think. I want to say he was living.
Something like that. He had a couple of jobs. I don't know if it was the dam at the time of the skyjacking, but he had lived there at some point near, So yeah. Anyway, so do your worst on Rekka, on this clown. Rekka doesn't match the physical description at all. He looks wildly different from what we would expect Cooper to look like. He had an accent for sure. He also had a very unique way of speaking and saying things that would have been called out. He didn't sound, I love Rekka, but he did not sound like an educated man. He was not well spoken by any means, and you can listen to tapes of him speaking. Not to mention the fact that part of his story is that he lands in Cle Elum, Washington, which is wildly outside of where the plane would have flown. And there's a lot of sketchy details about his life and sordid past. Some of those I believe are true, and some of them might be exaggerations from Rekka himself. I don't want to put the blame on anyone else. I think there's a good chance that Rekka is the one who got his family and friends to believe this story. But I think more than anything, disproving Rekka would be his physical description and his voice. Rekka could have pulled it off. He was the guy who would have pulled it off. I think he was looking for a crime that he could commit with a parachute. I truly believe that. But for being Cooper, he's a super thick, stocky guy. His head shape is wrong. There was a good chance he was rocking a mustache at the time. He had a thick, northern Midwest / Polish weird accent that would have been called out right away, and was not an eloquent speaker.
Yeah, not even I'm trying to fix my camera here. It's all blurry. But anyway, yeah, you're right. He's just, I mean, Cle Elum it's dead immediately. Like it's just dead. I mean, that's 100 and maybe 50 miles away from the drop zone.
Over a mountain pass.
Over a mountain pass, 150 miles away. And for those who aren't good at distances, I looked it up. That's basically something like saying that a guy jumped out over Philadelphia. I mean, we're like, no, it was DC where he landed. It's like, what? No, right? Who would do that? So I'll fix my camera there. Blurry son of a gun. Anyway, yeah. So, all right, what are we gonna do? Who we got next? Okay, yeah. Time out.
There are many other. I'm looking at the chat right now. There are many other suspects that were in Washington. Kenny Christensen was in Washington that night.
There we go. Oh, well, that's true. But no, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Rerea, the Clay Ellum thing is just aggravating. And again, look at this nose, people. Look at that. I mean, smashed with a frying pan. Like, that nose would be so recognizable.
And what year is that picture?
That's young. That's when he got married.
That's young.
In the 50s. So his nose is even bigger.
Because in the 70s, he looks different than that.
Yeah.
He was thicker from drinking and rocking a rough lifestyle and a big, thick mustache. I mean.
Well, I like what you said. He just does not seem educated. Just doesn't seem educated at all, smart enough to even come up with this. I mean, this guy's robbing Bob's big boy, and again, he's just a liar, just a serial liar. As I've said before, I think I said on the first time I was on your podcast, he was cosplaying as a secret agent, right? He had these fake passports, these fake documents drawn up. He was stolen valor, basically, just to say what it was back then. What they would call it now is he was cosplaying before it was cool. He liked showing off to his buddies. Oh, and I did this and that and that. Anybody who's ever been to a VA hall knows these guys. These types who were never in combat, and so that's what they're on about. I
would recommend everyone watch DB Cooper: The Real Story.
Yeah,
because we've all heard that a million people have confessed to being DB Cooper. But to my knowledge, there's only one taped confession that you can listen to. And that is Rerea. Amazon has DB Cooper: The Real Story. I want to say it's
like $10 maybe.
Yeah, for all 4 of the episodes.
Yeah, I bought it.
It's done well. Shout out to Dirk Waranga. He did a great job on it. Mm-hmm. Reca's not in my top 10 suspects, but I love DB Cooper content, and this one is good. This one is really good.
It is good. I actually liked it. I actually put it on the other day, a few months ago, just because I don't know why. I was in a bad mood and wanted to torture myself, but I bought it. And the thing about the confession about Rerea is that I do, even though I know it's BS, there's still something kind of cool about hearing an old guy tell a story like that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's garbage because he's like, I was gonna jump out the side door, and the stewardess said, go out the back. I mean, it's just preposterously stupid, but it does. There is some, like, you could almost imagine it. You know what I'm saying? So if none of you have heard that, it's worth it just to listen to a guy who's old, who knows parachutes and things, talking about where he came down and what he did. And I could see if you knew nothing about nothing, it could sound very convincing. He was a good storyteller, at least, but he just didn't. But he had to be led by the old guy who was
Carl Lauren.
Yeah, Carl Lauren. Yeah,
rest in peace, Carl.
Yes, he died. I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, but the thing about Rerea, though, is I believe we're on. This guy does not deserve 3 Cooper books. There are 3 Cooper books on this guy, right? There's Cunning's, or maybe 4.
I have 3.5. I don't think the other book was released, but I've read it.
Jeez. So yeah, no, not worthy at all of, I don't know, of 3.5 books. Okay. So you have to defend blank. Okay. So you don't know a lot about this guy. You don't know a lot about
Jason Langth. No, unless there was a book written about him. Then I would just read what was posted on the Drop Zone, or maybe in a phone call with you or Marty or someone like that.
So Langth, for those who don't know, I do believe that Jason Langth is the most investigated suspect.
Is he the Egg Harbor one?
He is the Shelton lead.
Okay, the Shelton lead. Okay.
Egg Harbor is Catalano. So Jason Langth was one of the few who was picked out when Ralph Hope did his review. This photo is him when he's in college, so we don't know what he looked like when he was older. But
But he
Langth
looks just like the Bing Crosby sketch.
well, they liked him. I mean, it's interesting. The FBI says that a bunch in their files. They're like, this guy does look like the sketch. Even the FBI is saying that. So, but this is a guy who reportedly was practicing night jumps in the 6 months prior before the hijacking. In one of these jumps, he even knocked his front teeth out. He hit a tree. Night jumping, if you talk to guys like Meltzer, was very rare back then, and it was risky, and they just didn't do a lot of it. But he was doing it, so people noticed he was doing it. He had talked about pulling off a perfect crime. He was a criminal, a very unsavory person. In fact, there's things that came out on Reddit last year from a granddaughter that's really unpleasant, but about him that I should not get into on this family show. But Langth was not a good guy at all. In fact, he spent his elder years, he spent his 40s and 50s and 60s ripping off old people. Like he did some kind of like scam on old people, take their money. Not a good guy. In fact, though, the real kicker was he lied. He's the only guy I know of in the FBI files who lied about where he was on that day. So that is very strange. And I remember I sent that to Larry Carr and I said, Larry, what do you think about this? He goes, well, that's something, isn't it? I was like, yeah. They asked him what he was doing the week of the hijacking. He goes, oh, well, he was an industrial chemical salesman, which is kind of
straight out of the Gunther book.
It is. And also on the nose with the tie particles a little bit. But anyway, they asked him, I said, what are you doing? Where were you? He goes, oh, well, I was selling chemicals in Colorado. I was in Colorado Springs doing that. And they go, okay, well, do you have like work logs you can give us and show us? He goes, oh yeah, I can give that to you. And he gives them these work logs. And when they started like calling these numbers and investigating who he had been to see that day, it was all fictional. He had made it up. And the businesses that weren't fictional, they were like, we never saw that guy. So the FBI was like, okay, that's odd. So he lied about what he was doing. Now, the FBI, they do write, they're like, look, maybe we're overthinking. Maybe he was just a lazy asshole and was trying to skim off his employers by saying, oh, I went and did these sales visits, right? When he didn't do it. So maybe he was
and when were they asking him?
It was not February 72. So not long after.
I know, but if I asked you, Ryan, okay, do you remember February 10th? Where were you?
Sitting right here, but I'm sure. But I know what you're saying. But no, I agree. But I guess that's where the benefit of him saying, well, I have work logs. I can show you where I was, whatever. So he did that. So he's investigated again. So they kind of drop it a little bit. But they're like, we can't. They moved on from him for some reason. Then in 77, they investigate him again, and they say, will you take a polygraph? He goes, hell no. Which I'd say the same thing. I would never advise a client to take a polygraph. He says, hell, I'm not doing that. They investigate him again in 79, then in, I believe, 86, then in 93, then in 03. So basically they kept getting tips over the years of, hey, this guy was a skydiver back then. And he's a real jerk and we don't like him. And you should look into him. Oh yeah. And the FBI was really, in 77, they were really concerned because part of the tip was he's receiving monthly stipend checks from a Canadian bank, which is weird. He had no connection to Canada. So the FBI send people into Canada to go investigate this guy. They go to this bank. They're like, hey, we're investigating a guy, Jason Langth. Can you tell us about this transaction you're doing with him? And they go, you have no jurisdiction here, pal, or whatever Canadians say to people, buddy, guy. You have no jurisdiction here, guy. Beat it. So they tell him to. They said they didn't know what the FBI was talking about, and that they should beat it. So the FBI had to tuck their tails and get out of there because they said you have no jurisdiction, and we're not telling you about our clients, our bank. So good for them. But that was sketchy. They thought, obviously getting stipend checks, jumping at night, skydiver looks like the sketch. Lied about where he was, possibly. So
Well, what evidence is there against him being Cooper?
He offered his DNA freely in 03. He was like, he even told him, he said, "Hey, do you want my blood too? I'll give you my blood." They're like, "No, we're fine." They took oral swabs, and the DNA didn't match. But again, I don't put any stock into matching that DNA. But he offered his DNA. Now maybe he wanted, I don't know, maybe he was an old man by then and didn't care, or maybe he just didn't think he left anything for there to be DNA. I don't know. But he was a smoker. I mean, the thing that hurts him is that in 72, his photo was shown to one of the stewardesses, and they did say it wasn't him. So he loses a lot of points because of that. And that's probably why they moved on in 72 from Langth. But Langth is actually a pretty good, he's actually a great suspect, really. If it wasn't for the photo ID for, I think it might have been Flo saying I don't think that's him, then I mean he could be Cooper for sure because he's a real jerk.
And the FBI would have probably taken a picture of him. Shown that.
Well, they got it from his. I've actually FOIA'd for the photograph, the actual photograph. It was from his wife. They went to his. We have the 302 where they go to visit his wife and they're like, "Hey, do you have a picture of him?" And she goes, "Yeah, sure. This was last year or whatever." And so she goes, "Give it back," and they never did, of course. But there's actually Jim McClellan, who was the guy who was flying the small aircraft that the Rackstraw grift, like to say, was something. He was the guy who was flying around. I talked to him last year, right? He lives in Le Center, or he lives outside Le Center. It's the McClellan airfield, that little airstrip, which is like his front yard. When the FBI came to his house, they were like, he was working as an engineer in Vancouver. And they like didn't bust on his door, but they banged on his door, and his wife let him in, and they said, "Give us a picture of him." And she gave like a wedding photo, and she was like, "I want that back." And his wife told us, she was like, "I never got it back." So the FBI took McClellan's picture. But anyway, that's Langth. So, okay, so you're still up to defend. So, okay, you have to defend Dick Lepsy.
Dick Lepsy. So he disappears shortly before the hijacking in a very suspicious way. He's a man. He looks similar to the sketch. He has brown eyes. And he would have needed to start a new life. So he definitely needed $200,000 to do that.
And that's it. Yeah.
And that's it.
He does have very Bingish looking features. I think he's a
little bit on the young side. Was he like 34, 35? Yeah. But even like, I love Ross Richardson's book, but even like when he talks about like the kind of family man he was and things, it doesn't make sense to be Cooper.
No.
I know I'm trashing my own suspect here, but
no, he doesn't. Yeah. So no, Lepsy, I believe he goes missing in 69. So it's actually a couple years. It's not like List, who was missing 5 minutes earlier, or Melvin Wilson, Lepsy came about, I think. I don't even know. I don't think Ross's book was the first time we were discussing Lepsy. I feel like we were discussing Lepsy 2015-ish even.
Yeah, I think he was when the missing persons.
Yeah, somebody found him on the missing persons database. And
he was reported missing right away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so yeah. And so that's another clue about him being a good guy, is that he's not like, I know that Ralph Himmelsbach one time was asked, why has there never been a missing persons report for a Cooper who matches? And he says, well, I think Cooper was a guy who was a criminal sort who outstayed his welcome in a lot of places, and nobody missed him. So, and I even asked Marty that. Marty was obviously, McNally was living a rough and tumble life back then, as a criminal and stuff. And I asked Mac and his sister, actually at CooperCon, I asked them both, because I wanted to ask a Coopery guy, would your family have reported you missing? How long would it have taken? And he said, I don't know if they ever would have reported me missing, because he was the black sheep of the family, and he kind of did what he wanted to do and came and went and just he lived by the seat of his pants. And his sister said the same thing too. She was like, well, I don't think that we would have done anything on Marty, So the fact that he was reported missing kind of helps say he wasn't Cooper, because he was a family man who, when a family man goes missing, then people go, oh, okay, it's just, but again, he's young, no military experience at all. Okay. He's one of
He was
two.
a manager of a grocery store.
Yeah. In fact, there's only 2 suspects that I know of on our wheel of fortune there, on our roulette wheel, who weren't military veterans. And that's Vordahl and Lepsy. And Vordahl was obviously working in the Manhattan Project at the time. So he was exempt from military service. He was creating something that could kill a lot more people than a rifleman could, right? So he was more valuable that way. But Lepsy was not in the military. So no military, no pilot's license, no aviation, nothing. I don't know what happened to him. It's obviously still a mystery for his family that maybe look, people are suicidal sometimes. Maybe for what, he did have 4 kids. Maybe that was stressful. I don't know. Maybe he met a girl.
His cars found at the airport. I think that is like some sort of a terrible kidnapping or car hijacking type situation,
where they go and park the car at the airport to make people think that that the guy wasn't killed or something.
Or maybe they even went to the airport.
As I'm saying, that the people who stole the car.
Yeah. So maybe they got on an airplane.
Yeah, I forgot that detail. His car was found with a pack of cigarettes sitting in there, I think. Yeah. Yeah, it's sad for his family. I hate that. Okay.
Yeah, and one detail from the book I thought was interesting, if I'm paraphrasing this, but it was like he would go smoke in his car on his breaks. So if he's going somewhere, is he going to leave his cigarettes in his car? No.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, he's probably dead. Probably. It's sad. All right, so I have to defend. Okay. The Unabomber.
The Unabomber. All right. I'm ready for this defense. Let's hear why the Unabomber is Cooper.
All right. Let's bring up Kaczynski from back then. There he is, from back in that time period. All right. So there's Ted Kaczynski from roughly that same era. I would say that Kaczynski, I believe he tried to blow up a plane already at some point in his life. I think he did. I forget. We have a guy who
he did try to blow up a plane.
You should get him on. We call him a crazy Uncle Joe Holloway. You should try to get him on your podcast. He's the Unabomber.
I asked him to be on the show. Joe, if you're listening, I hope you've prepared more and are ready to do it, because I would love to do a Ted Kaczynski episode.
Look, Joe has done deep dives on this. I mean, he is all in. And I'm not convinced, of course, but I think he was too young. He was in his late 20s at the time. But he did try to blow up a plane once. Didn't like airplanes. Was much like Vordahl, was such a misanthrope and a genius that he could have just done this by learning about it. Same sort of thing. We know he can make bombs for sure. He was living in Montana already at the time, so a good place to hide away. A good place for no one to know who you were. He probably could have used some money to live off of, cash money to live off of for a while. He had no job, obviously. I don't know how he made ends meet during his, reclusive years, but yeah, I could just say that he was somebody who hated humanity, had no trouble. He was not empathetic at all, a sociopath for sure. And I do think that some of these hijackers did have sociopathic tendencies, because obviously being a sociopath just means that you don't have empathy for other people and don't care about scaring the hell out of other people or killing them even. And I don't think that he cared. So Kaczynski was smart enough to do it, would have had the motive to do it, would have had the means. He had all the time in the world was unemployed. Nobody was watching him. He was on his own. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, the Unabomber. What's the problem? Why is
the problem with the Unabomber, first of all, is that, like you mentioned, he's too young. He is, I want to say he's 28 or 29, something like that, in 1971. And other than him being floated recently, I don't see any evidence for it. He definitely didn't have any military service. And all of his crimes were sort of carried out remotely, so he wasn't the one being involved in it.
Yeah.
He's not the face of
put
anything.
Distance between himself, yeah.
Yeah, I don't see Ted Kaczynski being calm, cool, and collected and charming while Tina lights his cigarettes. That's not the Ted Kaczynski that I know. So I would be real curious to hear an argument for him. So hopefully it's Joe, right?
I don't think he was a smoker either. I don't think so. I mean, he may have been, but I don't think Kaczynski was a smoker. I don't think that's his style. I mean, Kaczynski didn't seem like a guy who would smoke. I mean, maybe he did, but I don't see that. Cigarettes are expensive, and he had no money. And I just don't think he would. He's a guy who lives so frugally and meagerly that I don't think those guys smoke a lot of cigarettes. And yeah, Troy here just says, yeah, that Ted had a nasally voice with a Chicago accent. So yeah, he may have had a bit of an accent, but just too young. And look at him again. I mean, Kaczynski, that jaw line is not. He had a very noticeable jaw. And look at his hair. I mean, my God, Kaczynski has 5 times the hair that I have now when he was arrested in his 60s. So
yeah, he has hair coming down in his forehead.
Yeah,
not coming back.
This guy had a amazing hair, obviously, just crazy wild hair. So I mean, not balding, not retaining. I think he's small too. I want to say Ted Kaczynski. If you Google height, I think he is maybe 5'8". So I don't think he was very tall either. So I don't. Yeah. So all right. Let's see. All right. So we're getting here. Let's see. You have to defend. Okay. E. Howard Hunt.
E. Howard Hunt.
Right.
Here we go. All right. First of all, the best piece of evidence for E. Howard Hunt being D.B. Cooper is when he's on trial for Watergate, he's wearing sunglasses. Clearly, that's proof that he's Cooper. Also, as one of Nixon's famous plumbers, he absolutely had the ability to plan something like this. Did he have the ability to pull it off? He might have. He always sort of fancied himself as an action hero spy kind of a guy. He had the connections to do this, and he had the motive. Is he doing this for the government or doing it independently, knowing that the government will have his back and he can say, I'm doing this for airline security reasons? You have Najib Halabi meeting with Nixon the day of the skyjacking. Clearly, E. Howard Hunt is involved in this. There we go. Look at that. Look at D.B. Cooper right there. Proof. Case closed.
Sunglasses, baby. Sunglasses indoors.
Sunglasses indoors. My man.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny. Yeah, I would say that, okay, so really to attack, I mean, really, well, I mean, I think he may have had parachute experience, maybe, I think he was in World War II.
Have a limited number of jumps.
Yeah, I think he did. I think during World War II, he was in they call it the OSS, which is the pre-CIA, I think that's what they were. I called the OSS. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe somebody can correct me on that. But I think that's what they were called. Something special services, something like that. So in World War II, he was there. He's the right age, of course. But really, there's just nothing to connect the guy. And I would say also that he
nothing to connect him. I just listed 50 things.
I would say that he became a bit of a public figure in a way. And that I think that because he became a public figure, maybe that's what the sunglasses were for, Darren. He was trying to not be a public figure, but he did write spy novels. Didn't he write spy novels? I think he wrote spy novels. Oh
yeah, a ton of them.
Yeah, so I mean, he actually was a pretty badass kind of guy, honestly. And like you said, he was a plumber. He was adjacent to like Skip Hall and those guys, really. These kind of like seedy sort of CIA agent dudes who just did things for the government, who were not good dudes. But
and they seemed to run wild in the late 60s,
they
early
did.
70s. And their names were out there. It wasn't like I'm doing all this shady CIA stuff, but nobody knows who I am. They're
Right.
on TV.
I know. Yeah, the Office of Special Services, yes, as they're called. But yeah, it's E. Howard Hunt's there's a book out there. It's actually free. Nate LaFolk's book is free actually on Kindle right now. So
does anyone else have a physical copy of that book?
Do you have one?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, it's on Kindle. Okay. Yeah, those are hard to find. What's the name of that book anyway? Unmasked?
D.B. Cooper Examined, Exposed.
Unmasked. Something like Unmasked. I think there's an Unmasked.
D.B. Cooper Examined, Identified, and Exposed.
Okay. What is Cooper Unmasked? There's something unmasked on Cooper.
That's Gregory Hall.
Okay.
D.B. Cooper Unmasked. Or D.B. Cooper Exposed is George Nuttall.
Yeah.
And then...
Yeah, I feel I must be wrong. I may be thinking of I don't know. I'm thinking of the E. Howard Hunt book. The not Unmasked. It's Revealed.
The E. Howard Hunt book is D.B. Cooper Examined, Identified, and Exposed.
That's it. Yeah. Marty McNally, our skyjacker in the chat, says Hunt had the nuts to do it.
He would have been chomping at the bit to be the one to do it, I believe.
It could have been. Yeah. So he's not, I mean, there are worse suspects than E. Howard Hunt. Absolutely. For sure. Okay. So I have to defend. Now, here we go. Thank God I have somebody I actually like. Melvin Wilson. Okay. Melvin Wilson has been my dark horse for a long time and still is, actually. He is really good on the physical description, like really good, actually. He's the right size. He was very dark complected. His eyes were blue, but Vicki Wilson, I talked to quite a bit, his daughter, she could not remember his eye color. And she asked, and her mom said, he had blue eyes that were so dark they looked black. So they were just black eyes. And he was the right age. I believe he was 43 at the time. But most convincingly on him is that he had just been indicted for counterfeiting $200,000. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, $200,000 counterfeiting. He dumped $200,000 in a 55-gallon drum into the Mississippi River, and then absconded. He went on the run and has never been seen again. Well, we know now he was seen again in Canada. He was seen again in Canada in 72. He shows up in British Columbia. He's from Wisconsin, by the way. So British Columbia by way of Wisconsin, which is roundabout. But he ends up there. He shows up in town. He's telling people he's a furloughed airline pilot, which is interesting. He says I'm a furloughed airline pilot, and gets a young woman pregnant. And then she lives in it. They raise a kid for a couple years. She dies, and then he just runs off and is never seen again. So we know that now. When all of us first got into Cooper, Melvin Wilson was I can't even say this word. I can't even say this. Kelowna, British Columbia. Kelowna, British Columbia, I guess, is where he was. But anyway, his new alias was Kenneth Mazur, was his new alias, by the way. But anyway, the fact is he shows up. This guy was on the run. He was a criminal, a legitimate criminal, a con man, heavy smoker. And look at the guy. Look at his FBI surveillance photo, by the way. Where is it? There it is. Come on, people. That's pretty smooth, to be Cooper. His hairline's receding. He definitely had a turkey neck. He's wearing a black skinny tie in 1971, mind you, still. He's wearing, that could be the Cooper suit for all we know, right? That is a surveillance photo from when he was doing this stuff in 71. He does have a thick lower lip. And he's a guy who, I mean, he or List would be the patron saint for no pull if we didn't know that he had fathered children after. But like I said, when we first got into when we were first coming up as young pups in the Cooper world, Melvin Wilson was still an unknown, right? We didn't know whether he was alive or dead. But it wasn't until, I don't know, 5 years ago or so that Vicki Wilson found a half-brother on Ancestry or 23andMe or one of those sites, and with DNA. I was like, oh, I have a half-brother. Oh, you were born, you were conceived in like January 72, right? So we know that Melvin Wilson, if he was Cooper, lived. But he's a Cooper, though, who lost the money because he shows up with no money in British Columbia, saying, oh, I'm a poor furloughed airline pilot. So he is a Cooper who would have lost the money, which I do like that. I don't like Coopers who kept the money because I think Cooper lost the money. I really do.
Does Melvin Wilson have any skydiving experience?
None. No, well, the segue into your attack on him is.
Yeah, I didn't think he did. And also, he's a thicker, stockier guy.
Yes.
He's not a thin man.
Which I would say, though, if he had been on the run for August, September, for 4 months by that point, maybe he lost some weight.
Come on, Ryan. On the run doesn't literally mean he's running.
I mean, he's poor, but you know what? Hamburgers were 10 cents back then. So you load up on a bunch at a Mickey D's there. But
I really think one of the only reasons he is a suspect is that $200,000 number and the time of disappearance. Other than that, there really isn't anything. I mean, we talk about, oh yeah, he matches the sketch. He was wearing sunglasses and had a receding hairline. How many 40 or 35 to 55-year-olds would have had a receding hairline in 1971 and dark hair?
Sure, but a part of it is is desperation, though. Is the desperation? He was a desperate guy who was on the run, and so the FBI keep thinking this guy must have been desperate because very few people are going to do this unless they're Mac in the chat here. Unless they're desperate, although Mac just wanted the money. Like I said, Mac is the outlier among all the copycats. He's just a genuine. I mean, Mac would have robbed a bank if it had come to him that day. So that's how Mac was. I know we love you for it, Mac. You've atoned for your sins for sure. Anyway, all right. So your turn to defend.
The Zodiac killer.
Yeah, man, look at him. He looks just like the sketch.
Yeah, that sketch looks just like the D.B. Cooper sketch. They're both men. They both commit crime. They're both on the West Coast. Both kind of around the same time period. Both are unsolved. That's about it. I don't even want to defend this one. This bullshit.
Yeah, I know it is stupid. I mean, we're not even gonna joke about
Zodiac killer.
That was put in there as a joke, really, because it is. I mean, I know you've gotten those emails because I get them. So
oh yeah,
it's like, what are you talking about? You go on the Reddit, it always pops once a year. It's on Reddit too.
Oh yeah, I think I've done 3 episodes that Cooper was the Zodiac killer.
That's right, you've done them.
And then I did 1 episode. Cooper was not the Zodiac killer.
He definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
The Zodiac is just that's yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is. This fascination to try to tie all these criminals together. I don't. Frank Morris and Frank Morris was the Zodiac. He escaped Alcatraz
and killed 20,000 people.
Oh, is that what the Frank Morris guy said?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've never listened.
Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers killed 20,000 people.
What, after they got out of Alcatraz? It was murder spree.
A secret one.
Okay, nobody noticed. Yeah, although I will say that I am very certain that those guys lived. I mean, I don't think that's even a question anymore. That the guys did escape Alcatraz. I think
they lived. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a photograph of the Anglin brothers. It's clearly them. in the 1970s, I guess, in Brazil or somewhere that was sent to the family, and if you watch the documentary, there's that great documentary where it came out, I think maybe 2020 or something like that, maybe like 2017, 2016. But when they filmed them handing that photograph over to the FBI, to the case agent who's still on the case, just like Larry Carr was, and National Geographic goes in there and they slide this photograph of the Anglin brothers in Brazil or wherever. And the FBI good guys, he just looks at it and just smiles. Doesn't even say anything, he just smiles, a big smile on his face. And they go, "Is that something you'd be interested in?" He goes, "Yes, very much so." Because he knows what they look like. It's them, very much them. So I mean, yeah, they got out. Mac would have been. See, Mac was such a troublemaker. If Alcatraz had still been, Mac kept trying to escape prison so many times that Marty McNally probably would have been sent to Alcatraz if it had still been open. Because remember, the Anglin brothers were not like bad guys. They were, and Frank Morris, they were just escape artists. Like they were there not because they were Capone type people. They were there because they kept escaping everywhere they ever were. And they escaped Alcatraz too, which is kind of funny. Don't put those guys in adjacent cells, but they did stupidly. But anyway, you've been to Alcatraz, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's small. I don't think they needed to be in adjacent cells. They were so close to each other, those people. Those are tiny little cells, man. Those guys, what a nightmare. But Alcatraz is a cool place to visit if you ever go to San Francisco. So, okay.
Yeah, at least they had a nice view.
That's a great view. Yeah, they did have a good view. All right, so let's see. All right. Is it Mike? Yeah, out to defend. Okay. Don Burnworth. Well, I will say, by God, that Don Burnworth is the best match to the Bing Crosby sketch that there is.
Yes.
In fact, he's the only person that I loaded up my pictures in here. I loaded up him to look like I actually gave him the composite because you can't show Don Burnworth without showing the composite sketch. I mean, look at that. I mean, that is wicked. That's evil almost. That's so close, right? If you drew that guy, if you drew Don Burnworth, you would draw the Bing sketch, right? So, but yeah, Don Burnworth, I would say, okay, so Don Burnworth was a furloughed airline pilot for Delta, I think. And his excuse for when they investigated him, he said he was in Germany, which was true, but he had absconded with his children. His wife was mobbed up. And his wife was like family to the mob. And he ran off with his children to Germany. And when he was investigated for being Cooper, he literally said, "Oh, my wife's all mobbed up. She hired somebody who looked like me to hijack the plane." So when your excuse is, I look like the sketch because my mobbed up wife hired someone who looked like me to do it, kind of cruddy. But I would say though that even though he was in Germany, I think as an airline pilot, he would not have had a hard time deadheading. It's a good alibi, right? I have been in Germany, and he goes away for 2 days, right? Flies back, does the hijacking, goes back. So I think that could be, he's not. He was investigated, but I just like, again, you can't get past that sketch. That's really redonkulous. So, okay, what's the problems with Don Burnworth?
Wasn't he actually in Germany at the time of the hijacking?
Yeah, but again, that's my thing is that, how would they really, I would say that, he may have known a way to deadhead on flights as a pilot. He still had a commercial airlines. He was still a Delta pilot. He was furloughed, right? So maybe he could have like deadheaded and said, hey, can I ride? And maybe he had to go through, I don't know, maybe there was no track of him flying or something. I don't know. Or just, sitting in the cockpit or something. I don't know. But he was probably
that picture looks incredibly like the sketch, but for everything that I know, I believe he was in Germany at the time. And another suspect that was like the FBI was super hot about, and then was like, okay, it's not him.
Yeah, and again, he just no criminal history at all. Not a bad guy. I believe he's another suspect who Mark Meltzer knew.
Because he remained a pilot afterwards.
Oh yeah,
right?
he actually has a patent on a 727. So interestingly, we actually have a suspect who has a patent on a 727. So he knew the 727 so well that certainly would not have had a trouble lowering the aft stairs. I don't think, if it was Don Burnworth. I mean, I think he would have known how to lower the stairs.
Am I thinking of Don Burnworth? But like, his only run-in with the law was like family court or something like that.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is he abducted his children and went off to Germany? Remember, that's what I was saying. Is he absconded with his kids,
and then he went to jail for that or something?
I'm going to jail, but he was extradited from Germany, maybe, or something like that. Yeah, and that's when he became a suspect. I think they were like, "Look, we know where you are," and they got him back from Germany. And when he was in custody, they roughed him up about being Cooper because he does look like the sketch, and he has a pilot who was furloughed, which is checking lots of boxes. He's also very fair skinned, though. There's photos of him as an older guy, and he's very fair skinned. He's paler than I am. So
I think I've probably only seen that mugshot photo of him.
Yeah, I'd have to like find it, find where that photo is of him. But yeah, he's around. Burnworth. But here he is. Yeah, I'll show everybody this picture of him as an old guy. There. You like that? Yeah. All right, but very fair-skinned fellow there. I would not say that's Cooper. I would not say that's olive-skinned, but that's Don Burnworth. There he is. Okay. All right. So getting close to the end here. Let's see. You have to defend. Thank God. Vince Peterson. Finally.
Vince Peterson.
Good luck.
Vince Peterson is a man who has been to the Pacific Northwest
once.
And I can account for all the particles on DB Cooper's tie with Vince Peterson. There's a real good chance he wore a clip-on tie at least once in his life. That's about it. That's all I got.
That's gonna be all you're gonna get.
It's rough, especially just talking to his daughter recently. So
yeah, look, with respect to Eric, Vince Peterson's the worst suspect that has ever been devised and has been taken seriously by people, I guess. It's worse than Rerea, which Rerea is an insult to the Vortex, actually, because it requires so much,
Yeah, but Rerea confessed.
Yeah, and he confessed. I mean, I guess he became a suspect on his own volition, I suppose. But Peterson's the worst. I mean, there is literally nothing. It's bad. And in fact, it's so bad. He was missing part of a finger, which his daughter did say wasn't crazy noticeable. So maybe not. But again, this guy had bright blue eyes. He was 6'2", which is probably too tall, honestly. I think if Cooper was actually 6'2", that's all they would talk about is how tall he was.
Yeah.
That's all they would say. His chin is like Jay Leno's chin. I mean, enormous chin. He's like who's that little moon man that McDonald's used to play the piano? Remember
Mac Tonight.
Mac Tonight? Yes, he has a chin like Mac Tonight. he's what James Coleman says, he's Nick Nolte's going to hijack this plane. Or no, Gary Busey's going to hijack the plane. He's Gary Busey, basically.
He looks like Gary Busey.
He does like Gary Busey. I mean, there's nothing there. Vince Peterson strikes me as meat and potatoes. Whereas we have Vordahl talking about flushing babies down the toilet. Peterson's like, make sure your kids are wearing their life preservers this summer. It's literally one of his, the only thing we have of him is, oh man, these poor children. Won't anyone think of the children? Is Vincent Peterson. That's not an airline hijacker. Okay, we love you, Mac, but I guarantee you Mac was not thinking of the children. He probably never has thought of the children wearing life preservers. Peterson's just bad. I mean, just bad. I mean, I cannot fathom. You just want to ask Eric, say, look, Eric, I know you say that there were 8 guys who worked at this lab, but what did the other guys look like if this is the one you settled on? Because anybody's better than this. I mean, anybody. It's literally the opposite of I mean,
there's only one thing. Okay, the tie particles link him to the skyjacking.
But who else?
Okay, my wife's dad went skydiving once. Is he a Cooper suspect now? No, he went skydiving once.
Right. Yes, it's bad. It's really sad. And I don't want to get on a soapbox here, but it's like I would have felt uncomfortable. And I probably wouldn't have done it, actually. I would not have gone on stage and talked about Milton Vordahl if his family had been like, no way, no way, no way. I'd been like, okay, I'm not doing this. But when his grandson's like, well, Grandpa was a weird guy. And then, they're like, well, then other people are like, yeah, I could see it. But with Peterson, he is Peterson strikes me as so vanilla that, like, Tuesdays were Taco Tuesdays, Wednesdays are Meatloaf Wednesdays, right? I mean, one of those kind of guys, just not going to go hijack a plane. It's really bad. So that's Vincent Peterson. All right. So, oh gosh, we're running out. So I defend. Okay, well, you don't know, and so you don't know about this guy either. So, Fred Catalano. Okay,
that's the Egg Harbor guy.
Yes. So Catalano was one of the other guys so when Ralph Hope went and reviewed all of the suspect files, okay, he said, I'm going to go review all the suspect files to see who was not eliminated. He came up with 4 names, and he said, I want the DNA for these people. McCoy, which I don't know why he didn't think he was eliminated, but that may have been, I really, Ralph Hope, if you were watching, please contact me. I've emailed you a couple of times. I want to know why you thought McCoy needed a second look. But he pulled out Fred Catalano, Langth, and Sheridan Peterson. Catalano was such a misfit. He was turned in by his own airline. Okay. He was an employee of the airline. They were like, this guy kind of sucks. Why don't you look into him? Because the FBI sent out letters to all of the major airlines saying, hey, do you have any employees who are assholes, basically? Let us know. And so Catalano was known as a rebel. They called him a rebel. He was always breaking rules. He had trained to be a 727 pilot, all right, and could not get work because of all the furloughs. And so he became a purser instead, which is like not exactly a flight attendant, but they're usually on bigger planes, like much bigger planes. And they handle, I don't know, they're just kind of like first class, I don't know, maitre d's or something like that. I don't know how to describe them.
I've seen a few definitions of purser.
Yeah, it's kind of.
And I was on a plane 2 or 3 years ago, and the person that was doing the, hey, if you buckle your seatbelt and if we land in water, that speech, they introduced themselves as the purser, and it was a male. And I was like, did he just say purser?
I know.
And I wanted to turn to the people beside me, but I was like, okay, I'm the only one that will care about that, and I'm not about to talk to people about DB Cooper on this plane.
A purser, though, yes, okay. But yeah, because a purser is like, I only knew that because of Titanic. So the Titanic, one of the quote officers on the Titanic who went down with it was this guy named Purser McElroy. And I remember being young and being like, what's a purser do? And why is he in all the pictures with the captain and stuff? In those days, in the ocean liner days, a purser was a guy who handled jewelry and things. So like if you had valuables on a boat, to keep somebody from going in a room and stealing them, they would check them with the purser because it was a safe. So that's where the safes were on ocean liners. And so pursers handled all the valuables that people would bring for safekeeping. All right. So, Catalano was a purser, misfit. Let me pull up his photo here. Where is it? Catalano was actually, I wonder if I can find it with Fred. Gregory, let me see if I can pull it up here. So Robert Gregory liked Catalano. He said, let's see. He said, Gregory believed the photograph of Catalano bore a very strong resemblance to the hijacker. He particularly noted the hairline, stating if the hair in the photograph was marcelled, saying that the hair in the photograph was marcelled, as was the hijacker's. He further noted strong similarities in the high cheekbones, the long nose, and eyes as he remembered the hijacker. So we don't have any good photos of Fred Catalano. He's older in this photograph. But Fred was about 38 at the time, had been in the military. Like I said, trained on a 727, was a real misfit. He staged in the late 70s like a takeover of, he tried to like get on the board for TWA because they couldn't fire him for some reason. So he tried to like, he filibustered one of their shareholder meetings and got in all the papers nationally in the late 70s for trying to like become part of the board. He was like, I think a regular person should be part of the board, and like held hostage this shareholders meeting sort of thing. So, but he was a real misfit. But what's sad is that we don't know if his DNA was ever collected. There's just nothing more about him other than this guy should be looked at. This is in 2001, but he was a suspect back then too. Because like I said, TWA turned him in. But what year
did he die?
I think in 2006. Okay. So, but he never had kids. May have been married once. So he was a real loner kind of guy. So yeah, he's interesting. I actually like Fred. I'd like to know more about him because it does kind of line up. Oh, and also his whereabouts were unknown. So like, he was off the week of Thanksgiving, he was off, and he was living in Northern Oregon at the time. I believe in Salem, maybe.
Okay.
I think isn't that the north part?
It's kind of central, maybe more northern.
Is that north of Eugene?
Center Point. Yeah, it's north of Eugene.
Okay, so yeah, it's I think Salem, Oregon, where he was living at the time. Originally from New York, though, so he may have had a Brooklyn accent or something like that. So it might not have worked. But we like Fred. Okay, so
for some reason, when I hear Fred Catalano, I'm picturing like a New York accent.
All right. Well, yeah, I know it does sound very Anyway, all right. So here's our last one. Okay, and it's you defending Barbara Dayton.
Oh, hell yeah.
I know. Lucky you.
Barb Dayton never was caught because they were looking for a man. So Barb Dayton had the ability to pull this off. She was a pilot. I think she would have known how to do this. I think she would have known where the plane should fly. And then she just goes about her life. It wasn't about the money. It was just about proving to herself that she was still a badass. So that's why that money never went into circulation. She essentially just threw it away and went about living her life, and then confessed to the crime and even wrote Max Gunther letters letting him know, but being so coy about it and hiding some of the real details. But even if you look at that, I mean, maybe it was like her fantasy about a love story is how she put that to Max Gunther.
Could be. Okay. Well, and I know you've always said that if you could pick.
If I could pick. Yeah. I honestly can't make a great case for Barb. Yeah. But I want to. I want Barb to be Cooper because that's the most Portland story of all.
Oh, it's time. Portlandia. I mean, it is oozing. It is like the people in Chaz would have loved the Barb Dayton story. Was it,
dude? If you thought DB Cooper was a Pacific Northwest hero, wait until everyone finds out that Cooper was trans.
I know. What was that place? What was the place in Portland that was it Chaz? Like the state of Chaz?
It was Seattle. It was on Capitol Hill. It was either Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone or the Capitol Hill. I don't remember what chop.
I think it was Autonomous Zone because that's Chaz. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what the chop was because they changed the name at one point. Capitol Hill. I don't know. But if you're familiar with Seattle, and I just told you, okay, there was one area that was taken over by crazy hippies, you'd be like, Capitol Hill? Yeah.
That's funny. The crazy hippies. Yeah, they were. But so Barb Dayton is defeated in one word, sideburns. Okay. DB Cooper, if you read the 302s, and this is oft forgotten, DB Cooper had sideburns to, if you listen to, depending on Tina fluctuated, but her first 302, I believe, says low ear level. So that's like not quite, that's like almost like me. Low ear level sideburns. All right. Barb Dayton's living as a woman. Ain't no sideburns on Barb Dayton. Period. So there you go. That's end of story. So, but
sideburns can knock Barb out.
Yeah. I mean, what's she going to grow sideburns?
She could.
I mean, I guess if he was planning this, maybe. And didn't see anybody for a while, I suppose. You know,
what a better costume as a woman if you could grow sideburns.
I mean, I don't know, but of course, their whole thing is, you know, as soon as she landed, the way Ron tells it, she lands on the ground, and she puts a wig on, like so as Ron would say. But no, another thing that really hurts Barb is the drop zone. Is Barb says that she jumped in Woodburn, Oregon. Is that right?
Oh, is it Woodburn or Aurora?
Woodburn, because remember, I tried to give them an out and be like, maybe they misheard and thought Woodland was Woodburn. Maybe they were mixed up. But no, that can't be right, because remember that Ron flew over there or something. Like, remember, Ron went to go investigate the cisterns where Barb said she hid the money. So no, not Woodburn, Oregon. And I tried. Like I said, I love the Foremans. And I was like, well, maybe they misheard and they thought Woodland was Woodburn.
Aurora and Woodburn are 5 miles away. So
okay. So
it might be the same place or same thing. I don't know. Maybe
right.
I'm conflating.
But regardless, that's way south of Clark County, Washington. And we know Cooper did not jump any lower than the Columbia. Yes, I am Ryan Sideburns. Thank you very much, Jay. Always had my sideburns. I'm attached to them. What about the sideburns? What about implants? Hard to hide that. Yeah.
I don't think Barb had implants.
I don't think so either. There's photos of her, and she doesn't look like she has much of a chest.
Yeah, and if she did, I imagine it'd just be easier to have like a weighted pre-stuffed bra or something than get implants.
Yeah, especially in that era. I mean, although Barb did have a operation, so in that era. So, I mean, maybe boobs would not have been a hard thing to get after that. But yeah, I mean, but the sideburns, though, that is often forgotten about. And it's interesting in that Gosset photo, he has no sideburns from 71. So maybe from the same month, well, yeah, I mean, okay. So, all right. I guess, yes, it doth be empty. My little bag here. So anyway, I will say that suspects are really almost like the bread and butter of the Cooper case. Like we just like talking. I mean, because it is a whodunit after all, right? So you have to know who the guy was. What's interesting is with Mac in the chat is Mac actually was roughed up by FBI and legitimately roughed up physically by FBI agents who wanted him to confess to being Cooper. Because when they caught him, think about this. If all these guys knew was the sketch, well, the Bing sketch looks late 20s, right? So here you have McNally. When they catch him, they're like, wait a second, you served for 3 years on Whidbey Island near Seattle. Your brother still lives in Seattle. You spent so many hours flying up and down the Pacific Northwest coast, because that's what Mac did, is he flew up and down the coasts of Oregon and Washington. So they actually, the agents who were out in Michigan where he was caught were like, tell us you're Cooper too. I'm not saying that. And so, and I'll tell people, look, you cannot joke about Cooper to Mac. It's not funny to him if you suggest he was Cooper, because he actually takes offense to it, because as a guy who spent 38 years in prison for being a copycat of Cooper, it's not funny that he could be Cooper because it's too real to him, I think. So
Oh yeah.
If anybody meets Mac, don't ever joke about him being Cooper.
And just like John List, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm admitting to what I did. Don't accuse me of something I didn't do.
Right. I served time for something I did.
Yeah.
I didn't do this. But no, it's not funny to him actually. And I understand that, because it's still a little too real, because if any of us spent 38 years in prison for a hijacking, being accused of being a hijacker is never funny. Wouldn't think. It's an unsolved hijacking, by the way. Nothing funny about that. Okay. One last thing. Jay says, y'all be honest. If you did a search in 71 and found money, would you turn it over? It was like $1 million. It was actually 1.4 million today. Basically he's saying, if you found the money, if Cooper lost the money, would you turn it in?
Hell no.
I don't think so. And that is a valid point. In fact, speaking of McNally, Mac lost his money, landed in a farmer's field. And I forget how Mac tells it. Mac, you've got to, look, you're on YouTube, man. You've got to be able to get with me and Darren and do Darren's podcast, do my show. Please.
I'd love to have Mac on.
Yeah. but I believe that it landed in a farmer's field. And I want to say that like the grandson found it or something. And the guy actually, he considered not turning it in. He actually admitted that. He's like, I thought about it. Who would have known, And he actually held American Airlines hostage. He was like, look, I'll turn it over, but I want a bigger. They were like, thank you for $500,000. Here's a $5,000 reward. He was like, I want more than that. And so I think he actually negotiated like $15,000. A lot of money back then. But of course, Mac will laugh his butt off and say, what an idiot that guy was. My money landed in his yard, and nobody would have ever known. The honest old farmer, he could have, that's generational wealth almost in that era.
Oh, I would have hid that money so fast.
Well, and I guess the only thing is you would be considered, basically you would be in receipt of stolen property. Because they actually, when the FBI, they did put out an amnesty. I forget, in the 80s maybe? Or no, it was in 76, the 5-year anniversary. They put out a thing that said, look, if you have Cooper money, bring it in. You will not be charged.
That went out in the newspapers, didn't it?
Yeah. It's like, basically, look, you're not going to be charged for possessing stolen property, because it was stolen property. It's money they stole. So you are possessing it, and and you know about it too. You knowingly know that this money came from a hijacking. How would you not? Right? You find, So I mean, even with little money that Slim Ingram found, they connected that to Cooper hijacking pretty quickly. And that was just a bundle of money, not a big bag of money, right? So it was pretty interesting. But yeah, yes, Max says, Ryan, they thought it was me. Yeah, I know they did. They didn't think it was you. And they roughed you up for it, as you said. He said I think Max said they gave him a beating for it because he wouldn't confess to being Cooper back then. But anyway, so I'm looking forward to eventually seeing a 302 where they showed Mac's photograph to the stewardesses. I bet they did.
I'm sure you have to.
Yeah, surely. So that'd be interesting to see Mac.
Even if they didn't think that Mac was Cooper, you still have to show his photo to the stewardesses.
Yeah, just in case. I mean, and that's I didn't throw him in here. He was in the one with me and Andrade Heineman. With respect to Flyjack, not Heineman. Not Heineman. I mean,
see, I want to hear Flyjack's argument. Flyjack, if you are listening or watching, please reach out to me. I love you. I want to hear your argument. I hate Ryan. He knows nothing. He's a clown. I only trust you, Flyjack.
Hey, man, me and Flyjack are cool these days, I think. So it's all right. I've emailed Flyjack back and forth. We're fine.
I've emailed him a few times. Nice guy. I don't have a problem with him at all. My only problem with him is he hasn't been on my show. Yeah, and I actually asked him to be on mine. He said he was busy with other documentaries or something like that. I don't know. But definitely go on Darren's. And I told him, I said, look, you can
use your name Flyjack. You don't have to give your real name.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
You know,
I would love him to be on as Flyjack.
Right. I mean, you didn't get Georgia on ever, which is really sad. I would have loved to have Georgia on, just to have.
I'd love to have Georgia on too.
And by the way, I think it was, I didn't mention it, but I believe it was Georgia who was the first person to bring up the Unabomber. I think he was on that.
Yes.
Years ago.
Yes. Because I saw that and I didn't know if he was trolling or not.
Right.
I think I bring that up in a Cooper Vortex episode a long time ago, but I just remember being shook by it when I saw it on the drop zone. And I was like, is this Georgia trolling?
Because he could do that.
Yeah. Or is he being serious?
And then
sincere. I'm like, Ted Kaczynski, DB Cooper,
nothing.
And there's nothing. And that's why when it came up again recently, I was like, yes, please. I want to do a Ted Kaczynski Cooper episode.
If nothing else is taken away from this, Joe Holloway, if you're watching this, please go on. I know you are, Joe, I think. Go on Darren's podcast. You get shit on the Facebook group for talking about Unabomber, but you are a good defender of your theory. I'll say that.
Yeah, and do you think it's the worst theory that's ever been presented on the show?
I've heard way worse. In fact, the Frank Morris, the guy who roped down the fishing line and was landed on a mountain or something. I mean, you've got some doozies in there. But Tina Bar Money was landed on top of a bird, and the bird, my favorite one, landed on a bird. And then the bird just kept it on his back somehow. Like, get off my back, Money. And then dipped his wings and it landed in. That's silly. But anyway, all right, folks. Well, we're going to wrap it up. I do appreciate Darren. Thank you, man, for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, this is fun. So the next, I think my next podcast, the next one I'm going to do, Darren keeps sneak thieving his podcast out there without telling anybody. But I like that. Okay, well, I don't want to end yet. Hang on one second. This person says, I'll answer this one question. So would you both say that in the end, only 3 or 4 of these suspects are even remotely tenable? Is it more likely that Dan Cooper's name outside of those 5 hours is still unknown? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, easy. I mean, 99.9% in my brain, we don't know that guy's name yet. But
yeah, I would say 90%. I'm 90% sure that Cooper is a name I haven't heard.
I mean, there's a couple guys that I can waffle on, but more likely. Okay, so Max says that they did show his photo to the stewardesses. So, okay.
They have to.
Yeah.
They have to.
For sure. Okay. All right. Anyway, all right. So, but yes, Joe Holly, go on there. Flyjack, I know you're watching, hopefully. Come on my show. Come on Darren's, please. I mean, really, he's like the golden goose, I think, and he knows it.
Well, it's funny. There are certain names in the Vortex where it's that's the ultimate guest.
Yeah. And
then outside of that, it'd be why would you want to talk to that guy? Because if I talk to someone that wasn't in the Vortex about who would be the best person, they'd be like, well, obviously Tina Mucklow or maybe this person. But I'm like, Flyjack. It's got to be Flyjack. I got to have Flyjack on the show. And then, historically, Max Gunther, which is another name. If you're not in the Vortex, who's Max Gunther?
Yeah, right. And Flyjack is the top researcher who's never been interviewed for sure.
Yeah. And been playing this game for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, and like I said, I'm not being an egomaniac here, but I would say he's the only guy that I know of who we have comparable knowledge of the FBI files. I mean, he's a real 302 junkie like I am for the vault stuff. But anyway, so my next show, I believe, is going to be me and Chris Cunningham talking about, we did the myths and misconceptions last time, me and Chris. We're going to do one on things we know for certain about the Cooper case.
That should be a short episode.
Yeah, no, it isn't much. That'd be probably 20 minutes. But anyway, all right, guys. Well, I'll let y'all go. We're running up on 3 hours here. Y'all take care. Auf Wiedersehen. Good night. Bye.